"Why aren't you eating dinner?" my father-in-law asked. We were visiting him for New Year's after a long time. He probably noticed there was only enough food on the table for 3 people. "It happens all the time," my mother-in-law said, chewing on the hamburger steak I made. "What do you mean by that?" My father-in-law looked at my mother-in-law and husband curiously. "A daughter-in-law who can't give her mother-in-law grandchildren has to be a servant, right?" My mother-in-law answered casually. "That's right. Ruby is our servant. She stays in the kitchen to take care of us while we eat," she added. My husband sipped his beer and echoed her words. As expected, he always took me to his mother's house every weekend to help with chores. Even though I couldn't give her grandchildren, he said, "I'm letting you stay here, so you should appreciate my mom and do your best for her." I didn't want to go to my in-laws' house, but I felt I had to. Even if I said no, my husband would push me to go. He knew I got angry easily and struggled to express myself. "Mom, I brought a servant. He recently greeted me like that." "What do you mean?" My father-in-law looked upset by the way my mother-in-law and husband talked about me. "That's a normal family with kids. Ruby's infertility means I can't have grandchildren," he said. "It's not your fault, Ruby. You shouldn't let them bully you." "What do you mean? You live so far away, so stay out of it," my mother-in-law replied. "That's right, Dad. Don't tell me what to do. You didn't have to watch Mom lose the chance to have grandchildren," my husband said. They sounded like they were teasing my father-in-law. I listened to them while grinding coffee beans. My mother-in-law and husband always asked me to bring them coffee right after they finished eating. I had been so busy shopping for my mother-in-law that I only had time to eat a piece of sweet bread earlier. "Come on, I'm hungry too. I'm not sure what I'm doing," I thought. A single coffee bean fell to the floor as if trying to escape the grinder. "My name is Ruby, and I'm a 37-year-old housewife. During lunch hours on weekdays, I work part-time in the kitchen of a family restaurant. My husband and I rent an apartment. I used to work at the same bank as my husband, but I left 3 years ago to focus on fertility treatment. We couldn't have children, so we sought medical help and found out the problem was on my side. After a year of treatment, I learned that it was impossible for me to get pregnant. My mother-in-law and husband changed after that. At first, we were both working and handling our own money, but when I quit my job, my husband took over our finances. He managed our savings, paid the rent and insurance, and started giving me money for living expenses. At first, we lived comfortably on $1,000 a month, but when we decided to stop fertility treatments, my husband said, "You can save money now." "What do you mean?" I asked. He explained that since we weren't trying to conceive anymore, I didn't need as much money. "You can go back to work if you want," he said. He gradually reduced the money he gave me, first to $800 a month, then $600, and eventually $500. During that time, I desperately searched for a job, but my mother-in-law got in the way. She would say things like, "Working full-time isn't good for a wife. If you don't share the housework, I'll divorce you." "So, I shouldn't work at all?" I asked. "If it's only part-time, that's fine. You need to take care of Carl and serve me, since you can't have grandchildren. It's the least you can do," she replied. It hurt to hear that having children was so important to her, especially after going through painful treatments myself. My mother-in-law started asking me for help more often. "My bathroom is dirty, come and clean it." "I'm going out to dinner with a friend," she'd say. She would frequently call and ask me to run errands. I worked every weekend at her house, and no matter what I did, she always complained. "Why are you folding laundry like that? Put the corners together and fold it properly. Do it again," she would say. Once, she even threw the folded laundry on the floor, almost like she enjoyed making me feel bad. After dinner, my father-in-law asked, "I'm going out for a drink. Do you want to join me?" He added, "If you don't want to, it's fine. I was just thinking about what happened during dinner." "You've been treated so badly by Elizabeth and Carl," my father-in-law said, and his words made me tear up. I couldn't help but cry. "If you want, you can vent to me," he offered. He took me to a local bar that was small, but clean and cozy. We sat at a table across from each other. He ordered a beer, and I ordered a whiskey soda. We also got some mixed nuts and a salad. "I could tell Elizabeth and Carl were being rude to you," my father-in-law started after taking a sip of his beer. I shared how poorly I'd been treated since I gave up on fertility treatments. "I'm blamed for not being able to have children, and I'm forced to run errands. My husband won't let me work full-time and has cut my living expenses. Now, he only gives me $500 a month. What I hate most is being called a slave." I know. Elizabeth isn't happy unless she gets her way, he replied. She wasn't like this before, but she became selfish after having Carl. She yells at you so much that it's understandable to dislike her. Now you both pretend to be a happy couple. Do you think it's because he doesn't want to be with you? I'm jealous that you have a place to escape to, I admitted. You're not tough enough to make yourself heard, he said. Yeah, but talking to you makes me feel better, I replied. That's good. I'm happy to hear that. Before leaving the bar, we shared one more beer and whiskey soda. However, when I got back home, things took a turn. My husband and mother-in-law were standing there when I opened the door. Dad, did you have a night out with my wife? My husband asked, looking at both of us. I just invited Ruby for a drink, my father-in-law replied. What kind of relationship is this? You can't go out for drinks together, my mother-in-law shouted angrily. What do you think, Ruby? Isn't it wrong for a wife to go to a bar with a man? You can't give me grandchildren, but you still have desires. Both my husband and mother-in-law pointed at me. Enough, a powerful voice echoed through the room, startling everyone. My father-in-law was furious, staring at Carl and Elizabeth. What's wrong with you two? All I wanted was for Ruby to relax. My heart raced. It was clear that my normally mild-mannered father-in-law could become very difficult when he was angry. When he mentioned Elizabeth, she shuddered, probably scared of him or worried she had done something wrong. You said, what kind of relationship do you have with your father-in-law that you go out drinking together? Well, my daughter-in-law is treated like a slave, and I wanted to take her out to help her forget about it. Because of Ruby, I can't have grandchildren, my husband yelled. How can you say that when you hate children? I wanted to yell. My mother-in-law always blamed me for not giving her grandchildren, but aren't grandchildren different from other children? You don't really want grandchildren if you treat Ruby like this. You're just making excuses to blame her, my father-in-law said. My mother-in-law looked like she was about to argue, but then quickly looked away. Was she out of things to say or scared of her husband? Carl, wait. I heard you only give Ruby $500 a month for living expenses. Do you keep the rest of your salary? My father-in-law asked. No, I pay rent and insurance, Carl replied. Even so, I don't think that's all of your salary. My husband looked down and bit his lip, struggling to come up with an excuse. I came here to discuss our future. Let's get to it, my father-in-law said, leading us to the living room. What do you mean discuss our future? Carl and Elizabeth asked together. Just sit down, my father-in-law said. Make some coffee first, Ruby. Don't tell her what to do, my father-in-law yelled, making my mother-in-law shudder again. Make coffee for us and a cup for Ruby too. My mother-in-law nodded and sat quietly. My husband sat next to her, while I took a chair further from the table. I'll be retiring in a few years. After my current assignment ends, I won't be living with you anymore, my father-in-law said. What do you mean? Elizabeth and Carl asked together. Mr. Murphy looked at both of them. We've been pretending to be a couple for years, so we don't need to live together anymore. I'll live where I want, and you can stay here. That's fine, but after you accused me of being unfaithful earlier, I've changed my mind. I'm selling the house, he said. Elizabeth, I'll leave you, he added. What will I do? Where will I live? My mother-in-law was surprised and stood up. Just get a place of your own, my father-in-law said. How am I supposed to do that? I can't pay rent, she replied. Get Carl to help you, my father-in-law suggested. Carl stood up nervously, waving his hands. We don't have any money. If I do that, I won't be able to pay Mom's debt. Elizabeth gasped. My husband swallowed hard, but I heard him mention that Elizabeth was in debt. You just said debt, didn't you? My father-in-law said, sounding horrified. What do you mean by debt? Explain. I didn't mean it like that, Carl stammered. Explain, my father-in-law demanded. My mother-in-law started to cry when she heard his angry voice, but his rage didn't go away. Mom owes me $50,000. I'm her co-signer, Carl admitted, looking resigned. Around the time we stopped fertility treatments, my mother-in-law made an investment. At first, she made some money, but then the stock market crashed. You mean you lost money in the stock market and went into debt? I asked, surprised. I used family funds. We invested in stocks that were supposed to go up, but eventually, we got into debt. I'm paying it off with my salary, and Mama is repaying it by working part-time at a supermarket. This was news to me. I had never heard anything about stocks or debt before. My mother-in-law had lost a lot of money and borrowed more to make up for it when I stopped fertility treatments. She must have tried to pay back the debt by investing in stocks that didn't rise in value. I couldn't help but say what was on my mind. That's also when you and Carl began treating me like a slave. Ruby, what are you trying to say? Are you blaming me? My mother-in-law asked. The mistreatment started around the time I stopped fertility treatments, and I didn't think it was because she wanted a grandchild. It felt like she was taking out her frustrations on me because it was easier to do so. My mother-in-law stayed silent, as I expected. Carl had been using the money he took from my monthly allowance to pay off his debts. He didn't cut my expenses for some unknown reason. He just needed the money to help his mother. You stupid idiot, my father-in-law suddenly exploded. Even if it's family money, it's money I worked for. You put it into stocks without consulting me, and then you lost it? What kind of money management is this? After he yelled, my father-in-law left the room suddenly, as if he remembered something. We all followed him. What are you doing? He shouted. Show me Elizabeth's stuff. I want to see what she's buying. Stop, she cried out, but her husband ignored her and opened the closet door. The first thing I noticed was a luxury handbag. A quick glance showed at least 10 of them. Ruby, are these bags expensive? My father-in-law asked. They're all luxury items, costing over $1,000 each, I replied. He then opened a small drawer in the corner of the closet filled with accessories, rings, necklaces, and earrings, some with diamonds and rubies. I picked up a ring and saw it was made of 18-karat gold. Elizabeth, you bought all these expensive things without telling me, my father-in-law said, glaring at her. I'm sorry, she mumbled. Divorce, he yelled, turning to my husband in disgust. All this spending, investing in stocks without my permission, and treating Ruby like a slave. I want a divorce. I won't take no for an answer. How am I supposed to live? My mother-in-law asked, panicking. Talk to Carl. I'll sell this house and land immediately. You can sell these bags and jewelry to pay for the move, he shot back. My mother-in-law had no reply. My husband was sitting quietly, nodding and biting his lip. He no longer had the arrogant demeanor he used to have when he treated me like a slave. The next day, my father-in-law brought 2 sets of divorce papers. Here, Ruby, if you want to file for divorce too, you can. My father-in-law handed me one of the divorce papers. I looked at my husband, but he sighed and turned away. I definitely wanted a divorce, but I also wanted alimony from them. I thought a lot about my situation the night before. I had suffered for so long, and I realized I really wanted a child. The fertility treatments had been painful, but I endured them. In the end, I discovered I couldn't conceive. Holding back tears, I shared my story. All the painful tests and treatments I went through to become a mother were for nothing. I can't have a baby, no matter how hard I tried. As I was grieving, Carl told me he would reduce my living expenses since I didn't need fertility treatments anymore. What are you saying? This is all Carl's fault, I cried. My father-in-law looked horrified and told my mother-in-law to stop talking. She had blamed me for not giving her grandchildren and treated me like a slave. Do you know how hard it was for me? I asked. Of course, Elizabeth and Carl didn't have anything to say in response. In the end, Carl just needed money to pay off his debts, while Elizabeth took out her frustration on me after losing so much money in the stock market. I want you to reimburse me for this, I said. What if I say I won't pay? Carl replied. Then I'll talk to my lawyer, I said. My husband put his hand to his forehead and fell silent. After the new year, my father-in-law officially divorced my mother-in-law. When he put their house on the market, he found a buyer within a few days. The buyer wanted the land to build a new house, so they planned to tear down the old one first. With no place to stay, my mother-in-law moved into a rundown apartment that looked like it might collapse. Now, she lived with my ex-husband. Along with their living costs, they had to pay off their debts and alimony to me, which I knew must be very difficult for them. My mother-in-law worked at a supermarket during the day and had a part-time job at a pub at night. My husband also took on a second job on weekends at a wedding hall in addition to his regular job. They complained to everyone about how hard it was to pay their debts and alimony while seeing others around them happy. Meanwhile, I moved into a lovely little apartment and got a job thanks to my father-in-law. It was a clerical position at a security company where I could use my accounting knowledge and skills from my time at the bank. I want you to be happy. If you ever need help, just let me know, my father-in-law told me. He was on my side, and I was determined to do my best in this new chapter of my life. On the morning of my first day at work, I put on a new suit and made a promise to myself.
A year into my marriage, life seemed steady until a sudden storm disrupted my calm. My husband unexpectedly announced that I would need to take care of my father-in-law, who had suffered a serious accident and was now incapacitated. This was my first experience with such a situation, and I found myself overwhelmed. To my astonishment, my husband and mother-in-law decided to take a vacation in Hawaii, leaving me behind to tend to his father. They had no idea that this decision would lead to unforeseen tragedy. My name is Marigold, and I'm 32 years old. I've always had a passion for cooking, which led me to work for a major restaurant chain after graduating college. For the past 8 years, I've been in the planning department, where I developed new menu items. It was during this time that I met Merrick, the man who would become my husband. 2 years ago, after a long day, I visited my favorite Japanese pub, a place I frequented for some relaxation. That evening, I took a seat at the counter, and Merrick happened to be sitting next to me. Thanks to the friendly pub owner, we struck up a conversation and quickly discovered we were the same age. We clicked instantly, exchanged contact information, and before long, Merrick began inviting me out for dinner. As we spent more time together, I was drawn to his cheerful, easygoing nature, and it wasn't long before we started dating. After a year, we fell in love and tied the knot just 6 months ago. Now, we live in a cozy apartment conveniently located between our workplaces. With both of us working, I sometimes let house chores slide, but Merrick always reassures me with a smile, saying, "You don't have to be perfect at everything. I'm just happy being with you." His sweet and understanding nature makes me feel fortunate to be his wife. Our life together is filled with love and laughter, and even 6 months into our marriage, we still share heartwarming moments. I truly believed our happiness would last for years to come. Then one day, everything changed. I came home from work expecting the usual cheerful greeting from Merrick, but was instead met with an unsettling silence. Merrick sat in the living room, his gaze fixed on his phone, worry etched across his face. My heart sank as I approached him, sensing something was wrong. "Merrick, are you okay?" I asked, anxiety creeping into my voice. He barely looked up, his voice heavy with dread. "It's my mom," she called. "Your dad had an accident." The news hit me like a punch to the gut. I could hardly process what he was saying, but I knew we needed to act quickly. I grabbed Merrick's hand, urging him, "We need to go see him right now." But he shook his head. "We can't go yet." "Why not? Is he not doing well?" I asked, fear creeping into my voice. "He's not, but Mom's with him. She'll stay by his side until he gets better." His quiet response only deepened my anxiety. I released his hand and sank into the couch, feeling utterly helpless. My father-in-law had just turned 67 and despite his age, had always been in great health, spending his weekends hiking and golfing. The thought of him lying in a hospital bed felt surreal. I could see that Merrick was struggling too. Not only was his father seriously injured, but he was also the president of the company Merrick worked for. The weight of it all clearly overwhelmed him. A week later, we finally visited my father-in-law in the hospital. He lay in bed, a weak smile barely visible on his face as we entered the room. "Are you okay?" I asked, trying to mask my concern. He scratched his head and offered me an apologetic look. "Marigold, I'm sorry for worrying you." "Don't be sorry. I'm just relieved that you're safe," I reassured him. He nodded slowly. "I'm all right, just need some time to recover." His faint smile brought me a measure of relief, but the reality was grim. The accident had left him with a spinal cord injury, and though he could speak, he was paralyzed. The doctors informed us it would take at least 2 months of rehabilitation to assess his condition, and even after being released from the hospital, he would require ongoing care. During this time, Merrick stepped into his father's role as president of the company, at least temporarily. Watching my husband take on such a significant position was strange, yet he handled it well. Still, the stress weighed heavily on him. As we sat in the hospital room, my mother-in-law suddenly pulled me aside, tone sharp and condescending. "Marigold," she began, "don't get any ideas just because Merrick's the president now. That doesn't mean you can start enjoying yourself at his expense." Her accusations stung. "I have my own job and I'm doing just fine," I replied firmly. She gave me a smug look. "Sure, but you knew who Merrick was before you married him, didn't you? You're quite the opportunist." Her insinuation was clear, and this wasn't the first time she had made such remarks. She seemed to believe I had married Merrick for his family's wealth and status, but the truth was, I had no idea about his background when we first met. Still, my mother-in-law's hostility had lingered from the beginning, and I had tried to ignore it. But this time, I couldn't hold back. I couldn't hold back any longer. I didn't marry him for his money. I snapped. Merrick's vibrant personality had always drawn me in, but now I felt a wave of betrayal wash over me. His mother's sharp words hit me hard. "What are you talking about? You speak to me as if you really know who I am." I shot back, but her gaze remained icy. "Exactly, and no matter what you say or do, I will never approve of you," she replied with a smirk. My father-in-law, sensing the rising tension, asked, "Is everything all right?" "It's nothing," she said quickly, glaring at me before turning away. It was painfully clear that my mother-in-law adored Merrick. She probably thought I was just some woman who had married her son for his money, especially since we had tied the knot after dating for only a year. From the very first moment I met her at our wedding, she had been ruthless toward me. I never imagined her sarcasm and hostility would continue, but what troubled me even more was Merrick's apparent worship of her. A few days later, he dropped another bombshell. "Marigold, you know Dad will be released from the hospital in about 2 months, right?" "Yeah, why?" I asked, sensing something was coming. "Well, when that happens, we're moving in with my parents," he said nonchalantly. "What? Where did this come from?" I gasped, taken aback. "Mom suggested it. She said it would be the perfect time for us to move in together. She can't take care of Dad by herself," he explained, as if it were the most logical thing in the world. "But we can't just do this so suddenly," I protested. "What are you talking about? We're all in this together." "Mom's really grateful," he said, brushing off my concerns. I felt utterly confused. It was clear that Merrick and his mother had already made their decision, and my opinion didn't seem to matter. Every time I tried to bring up the subject afterward, Merrick ignored me, and his devotion to his mother only seemed to strengthen. Meanwhile, his attitude toward me grew increasingly critical. "How's the packing going?" he demanded one day. "I won't be able to take time off for the move, so you'll have to handle it all. You're also in charge of the housework and taking care of Dad. Don't let Mom down." His words left me feeling mentally drained, and the looming move only added to my stress. At work, the company was entering its busiest season, and I was struggling to keep up with both my job and the overwhelming task of moving. I was physically and mentally exhausted. 2 months later, we finally moved in, and my father-in-law was discharged from the hospital. There was no time for me to catch my breath. I immediately stepped into the role of caregiver. My day began at 3 a.m. as I prepared breakfast, did laundry, and then went to help my father-in-law with his morning massage and get him dressed. After breakfast, I would feed him before rushing off to work, always feeling pressed for time. Despite my best efforts, my mother-in-law was never satisfied. Every morning, just as I was about to leave for work, she would stop me. "Marigold, can I have a word?" she'd say. "I'm sorry, I'm running late," I would reply, trying to make my escape. "What's your rush? Sit down. I need to talk to you about breakfast." "It wasn't good enough today," she insisted, her voice dripping with disapproval. "I'll fix it when I get back," I said desperately, eager to leave. But she would raise her voice and demand, "No, sit down now." These confrontations set my heart racing and my head pounding. I started experiencing panic attacks and my stress levels skyrocketed. Each day felt like I was walking on eggshells, desperately trying to avoid triggering her complaints. I was barely making it to work on time, and my coworkers began to notice. They could tell something was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to share the truth. 3 months had passed since my father-in-law's return from the hospital, and I felt overwhelmed by my responsibilities. When I got home from work, I had to dive straight into dinner preparations. No matter how quickly I rushed through it, Merrick always found something wrong with every meal. "What is this, Marigold? I come home exhausted and you expect me to eat fish? Really?" he'd say, glaring at the plate in front of him. "I'm sorry," I would mutter. "I had to leave the kitchen to help your father, so I made something quick. You should be making something that boosts my energy." "I didn't want boiled fish," he'd reply, then grab a cup of instant noodles, pouring hot water into it. My mother-in-law watched silently, a smirk playing on her lips as she savored my defeat. Feeling completely crushed, I went to help my father-in-law prepare for bed. He noticed my pale face and asked gently, "Marigold, are you okay? You don't look well." "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a smile. "I've just been a little stressed with work, that's all." "Is that really it? I've heard a lot of yelling lately from my wife. Is everything all right?" "It's nothing. I'm just not very good at a lot of things," I said, trying to reassure him. I didn't want to burden him with my problems, so I kept smiling. But deep down, my heart was heavy with despair, and the truth was, I wanted to escape. I longed to escape this nightmare, but I couldn't bring myself to abandon my father-in-law. What would happen to him if I left? I couldn't just walk away from everything. The thought haunted me, but there was no clear answer. As the end of the year approached, I finally had some time off work, but even on my days off, there was no respite. On New Year's Eve, Merrick made an outrageous announcement that felt like a twist of the knife. "Mom and I are heading to Hawaii," he said casually while packing his bags. "Hawaii? Now?" I asked, shocked. "Yeah, we've been planning this for a while," he replied as if it were no big deal. "Wait a second, think about your father. How could you possibly leave him like this?" I protested, but my concerns fell on deaf ears. Merrick just smiled smugly. "He's fine with you being here. You're off work, so you might as well do something productive." Both he and my mother-in-law wore triumphant expressions, proud of their plans as they showcased their large carry-on bags. They seemed to find my confusion amusing, struggling not to laugh. Just before stepping out the door, Merrick added, "You'll take care of Dad while we're off to Hawaii. We'll be relaxing, so you handle everything here." With a chuckle, they both left and shut the door behind them. In that moment, something inside me snapped. Why was I left to manage everything alone? Enough is enough. I'm not going to put up with this any longer. I resolved that once they returned from Hawaii, I would file for divorce. I was done being treated like a servant. Until they came back, I decided to dedicate myself entirely to caring for my father-in-law. I stopped doing any extra housework and made a clear plan. I would let everything slide and focus solely on his care. The next morning, I prepared breakfast for him as usual. When I walked into his room with a towel to help him clean up and change, he greeted me with a smile. "Marigold, best wishes for the new year." "Happy New Year to you too, Dad," I replied, though my cheerfulness felt forced. I was still reeling from the events of the previous night. "Where did Merrick and Mom go? They seem to be in a hurry," he asked, looking puzzled. "They went to Hawaii," I said, trying to keep my tone light. I watched his expression shift as he let out a deep sigh. "Hawaii? Really?" He looked skeptical, shaking his head. "What's going on?" Suddenly, his mood changed and he gave me a curious smile. "Marigold, I've been waiting for the right moment to talk to you. I owe you an apology," he began, his voice calm yet serious. "Wait, what do you mean?" I asked, confused about where this was headed. He continued, "I've been able to get out of bed on my own for a few days now, but I kept it to myself. I wanted to see how things played out." Confused, I urged him to explain further. Slowly, he revealed everything. He had noticed how I was being mistreated, how Merrick and my mother-in-law had ignored his needs while piling all the responsibility onto me. "I asked them to help with small errands, but they refused," he explained. "They didn't care at all." It wasn't just that. My father-in-law also shared that he had received complaints from the company's executive director. Apparently, Merrick had been slacking off as acting president, and this trip to Hawaii was the final straw. My father-in-law suspected that Merrick had used company funds to pay for it, so he had asked a representative to monitor Merrick's actions. Sure enough, Merrick's mismanagement and laziness were exposed, injuring everyone at the company. "As soon as I get back, I'll be returning as president," my father-in-law told me. "And as for Merrick, I'm going to fire him. He's not fit for this role." Then he revealed another surprise. While Merrick and my mother-in-law were away, we were going to change the locks on the house. "They won't be coming back here," he said firmly. I was stunned but felt a wave of relief wash over me. Things were finally falling into place. A week passed, and then one afternoon, the doorbell rang. The front door rattled as Merrick and my mother-in-law, fresh from Hawaii, tried to get inside. The intercom buzzed incessantly. I picked it up and calmly greeted them. "How was your trip?" I asked, feigning cheerfulness. "What? Marigold, open the door," Merrick demanded, sounding frantic. "We can't get in." "I can't do that," I replied coolly. "Your father told me not to." "What are you talking about? Just open the door already," he pleaded. "Oh, and by the way, I continued, I heard your trip was paid for with company funds. Care to explain that? His voice faltered. How? How did you know about that? I watched their shocked faces on the monitor, struggling to hold back my laughter. Just then, my father-in-law joined the conversation, his voice firm and authoritative. So, you really did embezzle money from the company, didn't you? Merrick was taken aback. Dad, you? How are you standing? I've been able to stand for days now, thanks to Marigold helping me with my rehab, he replied. And I know all your behavior at work, thanks to the managing director. You've been lazy and irresponsible. Dad, no, that's not true. Merrick stammered, panic rising in his voice. Enough. My father-in-law cut him off. You're fired. You're no longer welcome at the company. Pack up your things and leave the office immediately. Merrick was now in tears, pleading through the monitor. Marigold, please, you won't leave me, will you? I couldn't hold back any longer. What are you talking about? Do you have any idea what you've put me through? You and your mother have taken advantage of me from the start, forcing me to care for your father while treating me like a servant. Do you even realize how much I've suffered? Calm down, Marigold. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry, he cried. Your apology means nothing, I replied coldly. When you left for Hawaii, I realized there was no point in continuing this marriage. I don't want anything more to do with you. I'm done. Merrick stood there, dazed, as my mother-in-law rushed to support him. It was a pitiful sight, mother and son united in defeat. My father-in-law, holding the divorce papers I had picked up earlier, stepped forward and handed them to Merrick. Sign these now, he ordered. Merrick and my mother-in-law signed the papers without protest, knowing they had no other choice. I kicked them out of the house and locked the door behind them, ignoring their pleas as they pounded on the door and begged to be let back in. Since that day, I haven't seen either of them. Rumor has it they're both unemployed and living in a comic book cafe, picking up odd jobs just to get by. It's a far cry from the comfortable life they used to lead, but I believe it's the punishment they deserve. After the divorce, my father-in-law graciously told me, I'll hire a housekeeper from now on. You're free to live your own life. I took his advice and moved into a place closer to my job. Now, I'm living a peaceful, fulfilling life, and I'll always be grateful to my father-in-law for helping me escape that nightmare. I'm determined to repay his kindness in any way I can. Lennox will share how I took control of my life and ended my husband Calloway's manipulative hold over me. For privacy, I'll be using fake names since it's important to remain anonymous, especially as a well-known lawyer in my state. I won't delve into all the details of how Calloway and I met, fell in love, and eventually divorced. What matters is that our love was never truly mutual. Calloway was unfaithful, and the signs were always there. He distanced himself, spent long hours away, and often went on business trips. Even though I had a successful career as a lawyer, Calloway always saw me as a failure simply because I didn't earn as much as him. One day, during one of his many trips, I made the decision to investigate. I found an old laptop of his and discovered a hidden Facebook account, which confirmed my worst fears. He was having an affair with a beautiful woman he clearly considered more attractive than me. Calloway constantly criticized my appearance, and it crushed me to realize he had chosen someone else. Angry and heartbroken, I confronted him the moment he returned. Calloway, are you cheating on me? I have proof, I demanded. His response was cold, almost cruel. Lennox, you just aren't interesting to me anymore. You're always wrapped up in your pointless cases, ignoring me. And let's be honest, you're not exactly a supermodel, he sneered. Stunned, I shot back, what are you even talking about? I have a demanding job and you knew that when we got married. I haven't ignored you. It's you who stopped coming home. You shut me out. That's how I uncovered the truth. But instead of guilt or regret, Calloway's heartless response left me speechless. He twisted everything, making it seem as though his infidelity was somehow my fault. A ridiculous claim I wasn't going to let him get away with. Rather than defend himself, Calloway's tone turned even colder. He smirked and said, I'm glad you found out, Lennox. Now I don't have to hide her anymore. She's gorgeous and we're going to have a perfect life together after I divorce you. Finally, I can marry someone worthy of my name. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. A chill ran down my spine as I realized he had been planning this all along. Worse, he was openly insulting me, praising this other woman as if she were the better choice. There was no apology, no remorse, only arrogance. He acted as though it meant nothing to him. Tears streamed down my face as he continued to boast about how he was going to leave me. This was the man I had loved for over a decade, and his cruel words shattered my heart. Through my sobs, I asked, "How could you say that, Calloway? After all these years?" "I've stood by you through everything," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and hurt. "I honored our vows and put you first, always. How could you do this?" Calloway's expression remained cold and dismissive. "It doesn't matter anymore, Lennox. You're just not right for me. I'm a successful business owner now, and I need someone who matches my status. A woman with average looks and a law degree that impresses no one just isn't good enough for me." Humiliated, I felt my chest tighten, but I refused to stay silent. "How could you say that, Calloway? I may not fit your shallow definition of beauty, but I'm a strong, capable woman. I've been a good wife to you, and now you're throwing me away." Without hesitation, he cut me off, his voice cold as steel. "I'm not considering divorce, Lennox. I've already decided. I hired a top lawyer, and the papers are ready. I'll be filing soon. You better pack your things and leave before I get back. I don't want to see your face around here anymore." A few hours later, one of Calloway's friends arrived at my door with a stack of papers in hand. His eyes held a flicker of sympathy as he passed them to me. I took the papers, closed the door, and collapsed to the floor. The weight of everything crashed down on me, and I sobbed uncontrollably for what felt like hours, realizing I had wasted years of my life on a man who never truly loved me. But as my tears dried, something shifted inside me. I wasn't going to let this defeat me. I was stronger than this, and I was going to prove it, to him and to myself. Before the man left, he let something slip. Calloway was planning to drag out the divorce. At first, I was confused, but then it hit me, the prenuptial agreement. If Calloway cheated, I was entitled to half of his business. In my emotional state, I had forgotten all about it. Now, it all made sense. He wanted to prolong the process, hoping I'd give up and walk away without claiming what was rightfully mine. That wasn't going to happen. I immediately reached out to his lawyer and scheduled a meeting. Within 2 days, I was ready to fight back, and I wasn't leaving without everything I deserved. I moved out of Calloway's house and returned to my childhood home, which was still in my name. Once everything was packed, I sent him a message. "I've moved all my things out of your house. Don't worry, I took my ugly face and body out of your sight." His response came quickly, dripping with arrogance. "Good. My lawyer is the best, so don't expect much from this fight." But I stayed calm. "I'm not giving up my share of the business. Keep your distance from me, Calloway." I was done letting him manipulate me. This time, I would stand my ground and make sure he didn't get away with taking what was mine. I was ready for whatever battles lay ahead. His next text only fueled my determination. "I don't want to talk to you anymore. Speak to me through my lawyer from now on, and make sure you stay out of my house." The disrespect and condescension in his words sparked a fire deep inside me. It's funny how rage and betrayal can give you strength. Suddenly, everything became crystal clear. I almost laughed. Calloway had no idea who he was messing with. Neither did his lawyer, Jake. I arranged to meet Jake at a local cafe. When I arrived, I saw the moment he recognized me. His composure faltered and his hands trembled slightly. Though he tried to act professional, it was obvious that Calloway had not prepared him to face someone like me. Jake forced a nervous smile as we greeted each other, and I decided to ease the tension. It wasn't his fault I was caught up in this mess. "Hello, Jake. Nice to see you," I said pleasantly, watching the surprise flicker across his face. "Ma'am, I wasn't expecting you to come in person," he stammered, clearly unsettled. "The last names probably threw you off," I replied smoothly. "I got married after becoming a lawyer. I use my maiden name for work." "Oh, I see," Jake muttered, shifting in his seat, still visibly uncomfortable. "Let's not dance around it, Jake," I said, leaning in slightly. "Your client told you to drag this case out, didn't he?" He squirmed under my steady gaze, unsure how to respond. I decided to give him a way out. "You don't have to answer that. I've been married to Calloway for over a decade. I know exactly how his mind works." Jake fidgeted, trying to maintain his composure, but my words clearly hit home. Years of experience as a lawyer had taught me how to put pressure on opponents, and Jake was no exception. I wasn't here to intimidate him, though, just to make it clear that I wasn't someone to be underestimated. I leaned in slightly and gave Jake a reassuring smile. Look, Jake, I know none of this is your fault, so let me explain what's really going on with this divorce. He blinked, looking confused. What do you mean, ma'am? He asked, clearly not expecting what was coming next. Did Calloway happen to mention that he cheated on me? I asked, watching his face closely. His expression shifted, and I could see the truth dawn on him. He had no idea. No, he didn't mention anything about that, Jake admitted, flustered, but he did say you might try to make some wild claims to ruin him. I shook my head, giving him a sympathetic smile. Oh, Jake, Calloway played you, but hey, you'll be happy to know he really thinks you're one of the best lawyers out there. He has a lot of faith in you. Jake's smile was uncertain. That's kind of him to say, he murmured, clearly overwhelmed. But I'll never measure up to you, ma'am. I wish he had told me you were a lawyer too. He only said you worked at a firm. I rolled my eyes. Typical Calloway. He never appreciated my achievements. He always looked down on my work and never took me seriously. I paused, letting that sink in before adding, but I was smart enough to make sure we had a prenuptial agreement. Jake's eyes widened, clearly caught off guard. The word prenup hit him like a ton of bricks. He fidgeted in his seat, scrambling to process what I'd just revealed. There's a prenup in this marriage, he stammered, looking almost panicked. Your husband didn't mention that. Do you have any proof, ma'am? I gave him a calm, confident smile. Oh, I have all the proof you need. I pulled a folder from my bag and placed it gently on the table between us. I brought the documents with me. I figured Calloway would try to wriggle out of the consequences, but not on my watch. Jake swallowed hard, his hands visibly trembling as he reached for the folder. I'd really like to see those papers, ma'am, he said nervously. I'll need proof of the affair if you have any, Jake said, his voice cautious. Don't worry, I replied smoothly, opening my bag. I've got everything right here. I handed him all the evidence, messages, photos, legal documents. Everything was meticulously organized and ready. Jake took his time, reviewing each piece carefully. As he examined the evidence, I watched the defeat settle into his expression. He knew there was no way Calloway could come out of this unscathed. After what felt like an eternity, Jake looked up at me, resigned. You have solid proof of everything, ma'am, he admitted. I had no idea about any of this. I figured as much, I said, keeping my tone even. I know how hard it is to deal with clients who aren't being honest, especially when the other side has a strong lawyer. You're right about that, ma'am, Jake sighed, clearly weighed down by the reality of the situation. I think that's all we need to discuss for now. I'll have to have a serious talk with my client before we proceed. Someone will be in touch, though I can't promise it'll be me. I knew what he was hinting at, but I didn't comment. Instead, I thanked him for his time and left the cafe. As I walked out, I felt an immense weight lift off my shoulders. The sadness that had once consumed me was now replaced by a fierce determination. I went straight to work, preparing my own set of documents for the divorce. Calloway had created this mess, and now he was going to face the consequences. There was no escaping what was coming. The very next day, Calloway broke the silence. Despite instructing him to contact me only through his lawyer, he called me directly. His voice was furious when I answered. What did you say to my lawyer, Lennox? He barked. I couldn't help but smile. Oh, look who's calling me after telling me to stay away. What happened with your lawyer, Calloway? Stop messing around, Lennox. Tell me what you said to him that made him quit today. Your lawyer quit today? How unfortunate, I said, dripping with sarcasm. That's really too bad, Calloway. I guess you should have been honest about what you're up against, Calloway. You don't know what you're talking about, he spat. You're a nobody. I won't let you take my family business. Oh, I'd love to see you try, I replied, my voice steady. I'll hire a better lawyer than you ever could, and when we're done, you'll be the one begging me for mercy. Well, good luck with that, Calloway, I said calmly. Just a word of advice. Make sure you tell your new lawyer about the affair and the prenup. There was a pause, then the sharp click of him hanging up. I couldn't help but chuckle. He was in way over his head, and he didn't even know it yet. Calloway tried to find another lawyer, but word travels fast. My reputation in town was solid, and no decent lawyer wanted to be caught in his sinking ship. Anyone who entertained his lies would be swiftly dismantled once I laid out the evidence. He had promised to make me beg for mercy, but I knew it was only a matter of time before the tables turned. And I was right. One morning, as I was getting ready for work, a knock at the door interrupted me. It was early, and I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, there he was, Calloway, looking exhausted and utterly defeated. For a moment, I just stared at him, debating whether to send him away. But I let him in. I didn't want a scene outside my house. I had enough on my plate as it was. The moment the door closed behind him, I didn't bother with pleasantries. Make it quick, Calloway. I don't have time to waste on you. And frankly, I have no idea why you're even here. We were supposed to handle everything through our lawyers. Yeah, about that, he mumbled, eyes downcast, clearly embarrassed. I haven't been able to find a good divorce lawyer yet, Calloway admitted, looking defeated. Oh, that's unfortunate, I said with mock sympathy. You'd better hurry. I hear Callista's been dying to marry you. I'm not worried about her anymore, Calloway muttered, shaking his head. Listen, Lennox, we need to talk. You've been sabotaging my chances with every lawyer. It's unfair. I burst out laughing, genuinely amused by his audacity. Sabotaging you? Oh, Calloway, that's rich. The fact that you even think that just shows how little you respect me or my profession. You thought you could throw money at people and they'd fall at your feet, didn't you? His face twisted with frustration. I don't get it. What did I even do wrong? I crossed my arms and stared him down. Should I remind you? You lied to your lawyers about the affair, about the prenup. That's enough to embarrass any lawyer in court. No one wants to represent a client they can't trust, Calloway. And if you haven't realized by now, my name carries weight in this town. You might think I'm nothing, but I've built a reputation, a solid one. Calloway slumped, his shoulders sagging under the weight of realization. I know that now, Lennox, he said quietly, regret dripping from his voice. I tried being honest with a few lawyers, but none of them are willing to take my case. Well, that's what happens when you're up against an ironclad prenup, I said coldly. You should have thought twice before you cheated. But it's too late now. No sane lawyer is going to take your side, and you will give me half of your business. His face fell, and I could see the panic in his eyes. The business was the only thing he truly cared about. That's why he tried to hire the best lawyer he could, to drag this divorce out and exhaust me into giving up my claim. But now, after days of rejection, even he knew the game was over. Then, as if it were his last resort, Calloway did something I never expected. He started to cry. Please, Lennox, he begged, his voice cracking. You know how much this business means to me. Don't take it. Take everything else, just not the business. Why not, Calloway? I asked, my voice sharp. You were the one who insisted on putting that clause in the prenup, the one that says I get half if you cheat. You wrote your own fate. After everything you've done, do you really think I'm going to walk away empty-handed? I deserve this. It was a mistake, Lennox, he whispered, tears streaming down his face. I swear, the affair was a huge mistake, Calloway pleaded. I've even put the relationship on hold because I realized how wrong it was. Maybe we can give our marriage another shot. I'm sure we can make it work. I let out a loud, incredulous laugh. The audacity of this man was astounding. He was actually asking me to reconcile, as if I would be foolish enough to even consider it. I had heard the rumors that things between him and Callista weren't going well. Apparently, she was upset, and Calloway was unhappy too. But if he thought that was enough to win me back, he was out of his mind. I had learned my lesson the hard way. Marrying Calloway was a colossal mistake, and I wasn't about to make it again. I knew exactly why he was suddenly so desperate to get me back. You must be delusional if you think I'd even consider it, Calloway. Do you think I'm stupid? I know you want me back just to avoid splitting your business. Lennox, we were happy once. Can't we just look past this mistake and start over? I'll cut off Callista, I swear, he begged, trying to sound sincere. There's no need for that, Calloway, I replied, shaking my head. That woman will be gone the minute she finds out you won't be rich anymore after the divorce. As for me, this is my golden opportunity to walk away from this sham of a marriage. I'm actually grateful you showed me your true colors before we ever had kids. Now you're going to deal with the consequences of your actions. I was done. There was nothing left to say. Calloway continued to plead, trying to convince me not to take his business, but his desperate cries only reminded me of the countless nights I had cried myself to sleep because of his betrayal. Seeing him in such a pathetic state filled me with a sense of satisfaction. My revenge was complete. All I wanted now was a clean break to start fresh, and I got more than I expected. Karma hit Calloway hard and fast. For weeks, he tried everything to change my mind, begging me to come back home. But I ignored it all. I wasn't interested in his drama. I was ready to move on. Since he had already filed for divorce, I hired someone from my firm to represent me. I wasn't a divorce lawyer and wanted as little interaction with him as possible. After a month of futile attempts to win me back, Calloway realized he had no choice. He was forced to hire a lawyer and agree to a clean break. He knew that if this went to court, he'd be publicly humiliated and waste even more money on legal fees. So he conceded to a mutual divorce. Thanks to the prenup, it was easy for me to get the settlement I deserved. I had ample proof of Calloway's infidelity, and as the prenup stated, he had to give me half of his business. Of course, he wasn't happy about it, but there was no way out. Reluctantly, he signed over half of his company to me. We even offered him a chance to buy me out, but he had no money left. You might wonder how a big business owner like Calloway ended up broke. It's simple. He spent it all on Callista. The irony was delicious. She wasn't taking his calls or texts anymore. As she figured out he wouldn't be wealthy after the divorce, and now no one else was willing to date her either. Her reputation as a gold digger had spread far and wide. What goes around comes around, right? But Callista was the least of Calloway's problems. With half of his business gone, his income was slashed. He couldn't afford to maintain his lavish mansion or even keep up with the mortgage, so he was forced to sell it. Now, he was renting a condo, a serious downgrade from the luxurious life he once had. He even tried to get back with me again, hoping to regain control of his business. But that was never going to happen. He would have to figure out a way to keep things afloat or save enough money to buy me out. As for me, I was thriving. I hired someone to manage my share of Calloway's business, and everything was running smoothly. With the extra income from both the business and my law practice, I upgraded my lifestyle and bought myself a new mansion. I was living my best life, and honestly, I couldn't be happier. The divorce worked out perfectly for me. Instead of being played by Calloway and his Callista, I ended up turning the tables, ruining their lives and bettering my own. Things have changed since Lily was born. I used to see Mark's face light up whenever I entered a room, but now I'm lucky to get more than a grunt before he dives back into his phone. His job hasn't changed. If anything, it's less stressful than before, but something in him switched off the day we brought her home. Another painting. That makes 3 this week. Mark's voice sliced through the air, sharp and critical, whenever he caught me setting up my easel. He used to admire my work. He even had my best piece framed in his office. Not anymore. It's not like I'm spending your money, I replied, trying to hide the tremble in my hands as I focused on mixing blues and yellows on my palette. Each word felt like a punch to my gut. Could have fooled me. Look at this place. It's a disaster, he snapped, scanning the room, his eyes zeroing in on every toy and blanket out of place as if they were evidence of my failures. I'm with Lily all day, and she's a handful. I fought back, my voice wavering. Maybe if you helped a little around here. Help with what? You're home all the time. You deal with it. That was our deal, remember? I make the money, you handle the rest. Not my fault you can't manage. He cut me off, leaving no room for argument. Every night ended the same way, with him turning away, dismissing me with a scoff. As he left for work, Lily would tug at the hem of my shirt, her little eyes wide with confusion. Daddy mad? She'd ask, her tiny lips quivering. No, baby, Daddy just has a lot on his mind. I'd reassure her, pulling her into my arms and trying to smile for her sake. Here, help Mommy choose the colors. Together, we'd paint, her laughter drowning out the bitterness in Mark's tone, creating a world of color that felt like a refuge. I knew my paintings were good, not out of arrogance, but because they were the last remnants of a time when I felt confident and vibrant. That evening, when Mark came home, I did what I always did, greeted him with a warm dinner, a clean house, and Lily, squeaky clean from her bath and dressed in her best pajamas. Hey, I said, the aroma of roast chicken following me as I approached. How was your day? He grunted in reply, shredding off his coat and tossing it onto the couch. His gaze caught mine, then fell on the easel in the corner of our living room. Still haven't gotten rid of that junk, huh? It's not junk, Mark. I'm working on something, I responded, weariness seeping into my tone. Looks like a waste of time and money. You could be doing something productive, he said, walking past me to the fridge without waiting for an answer. Productive, it seemed, meant anything that made money or made his life easier. I guess I was doing neither to his liking. I'm doing something, I said, my voice firmer now. I'm raising our daughter and trying to hold on to something that matters to me. My painting matters to me. He didn't even pause, just opened a beer and took a deep swig. Call it what you want, Grace. To me, it looks like you're just filling time and making a mess. I'll have to pay someone to clean it up. The sting didn't come from the unkindness of his words. I was getting used to that. It came from the dismissal of my dreams and passion. There was no place for them in Mark's world anymore. Dinner's ready, I called out, feeling like I was putting on a performance. I stood there with trembling hands as I served the meal. Mark's parents, seated like judges at the head of the table, barely noticing my effort to create a warm, hearty meal. Their eyes were fixed on the easel by the window. What's this then? Mark's dad, George, a broad man with a booming voice, jabbed a finger toward my unfinished painting. Oh, that's just something Grace has been fooling around with, Mark chuckled, waving a dismissive hand before taking his seat. Real high-class stuff, right? Laughter rang out, but it felt like a knife cutting at my nerves, laughter that didn't reach their eyes. My, we have an artist now, do we? Mark's mom, Patricia, chimed in, her voice sharp enough to slice steel. Why don't you show us your latest masterpiece, dear? George bellowed, his smile more of a challenge than a gesture of interest. I stood frozen in place, heat creeping up my neck. It's not done yet, I muttered, but Mark was already striding over to the canvas, grabbing it with far less care than he'd use for a dish towel. Look at this, folks. Mark laughed, flipping the canvas around like he was unveiling a letter on Wheel of Fortune. It's supposed to be a landscape. Can you believe it? George's laughter boomed again. Looks like a blind dog's nightmare. Patricia tutted, shaking her head, her nostrils flaring with each derisive comment. Why waste your time with this hobby? Get a job or do something, anything, productive, as if any place would hire me. Mark snorted, setting the painting back down with a thud that sank my heart. The job market's tough out there, and well, look at her. I swallowed hard, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. I do plenty. I take care of Lily and this house. My words faltered under their collective gaze. Patricia poked at the food on her plate with a fork, as if she suspected it might be poisoned. Taking care of your family is the least you can do, she sniffed. But honestly, Mark, if you'd married someone with a little ambition. They continued tearing into me, their words pressing down, squeezing the air from my lungs. I felt myself slipping away, becoming smaller and more insignificant in this grand performance of theirs. Something inside me snapped as soon as the meal ended. With a fiend smile, I excused myself, marched up the stairs without looking back, and locked myself in the bedroom. Grace, Mark called, his voice rising up the stairs about half an hour later. You coming back down? We need to clear the table. I didn't respond. I couldn't. If I opened my mouth, a scream or a sob would escape, and I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of witnessing my breakdown. I scrolled through my banking app, a frown deepening the lines on my face. Our account was looking dire again this month, and the grocery list wasn't getting any shorter. Lily needed new shoes too. She was sprouting like a weed. Grace, why is there a charge for $48.95 for Martin's art supplies? Mark's voice tumbled in from the living room. I just picked up a few things, I said, tapping through the app to transfer what little remained of my personal savings to cover it. I needed those supplies. Come on, Grace, that's money we could have put towards something important. His tone was flat, almost bored, but with an undercurrent of something else. Was it disappointment? Frustration? Art is important to me, Mark, the same way your golf is important to you. I did mention that his golf clubs cost more than a year's worth of my supplies. Yeah, but golf is networking. It's part of my job. What does your painting get us? A cluttered house and wasted cash? It gets me through the day, I murmured, feeling that familiar tug of war in my chest. Mark snorted. We have to be smart about money, not just spend it on whatever gets us through the day. Budget, Grace. That word felt like a choke chain. I pay for my art supplies with my own money. Money I had before. My voice trailed off, not wanting to spark another fight. That money felt like a distant chapter, one that held job independence and a once-shared dream of my own gallery. Your money's our money, isn't it? He shot back, the implication that my financial independence was a thing of the past evident in his tone. And that money is running out fast. Later, at the store, I opted for the cheaper brands, counting every cent, every compromise. I picked up the smallest tubes of paint. the ones that could slip into the cart without drawing any raised eyebrows. Back home, I unpacked the bags with robotic precision, each item a reminder of our tightrope walk over financial ruin. Putting back some luxuries, are we? Mark commented, his gaze landing on the no-name cereal and store-brand pasta. Yes, tightening the belt, I answered without looking at him, concealing the receipts, a paper trail of my crimes. He rummaged through the bags like an investigator searching for a slip-up. Where are the Greek yogurts you like? Isn't this the cheap coffee? I shrugged, busying myself with placing a can of tomatoes in the pantry. Prices went up, had to make some cuts. Don't see any cuts in your art budget though, he said, his cold finger pointing out the new brushes I had tucked under a loaf of bread. I turned to him, finally meeting his gaze for the first time since the conversation started. This keeps me sane, Mark. My art keeps me sane. My voice was firm, and I clenched my fists around the countertop to stop the tremor in my hand. Well, sanity's quite the luxury item these days, isn't it? He said, nodding toward the brushes, his words deliberate and biting. That night, I painted not out of passion, but frustration. Each stroke felt like a challenge, a cut from our already strained budget to fit within Mark's expectations. But as I worked, I remembered a time when these brushes brought me joy, not the feeling of having to defend myself. Mark was somewhere across the country, tangled up in business meetings when he dropped the latest task on me. His voice buzzed through my phone, sounding distracted as if he was already halfway out the door. Grace, you've got to put together a birthday present for my boss's wife, Clara. Her big day's in a week. Okay, do you have any cash set aside for that? I asked, squinting at our already tight budget displayed on my laptop screen. Nah, you figure it out. Just make it look like we put some thought into it, he muttered, sounding preoccupied. Hang on, you want something nice. But I'm supposed to magic up the funds for it. I could feel heat rising in my cheeks. You always find a way to make it happen, Grace. With that cheerful little line, he was gone. I exhaled slowly, closing my eyes as I fought to push back the frustration gnawing at my last nerve. I didn't have the cash, but I needed something that would truly impress Clara. No pressure, right? After diving deep into her online world, it was clear she had a passion for art. Her feed was filled with gallery visits and photos of canvases that probably cost more than our car. She even posted pictures with artists talking about supporting the arts, patronage, and all that jazz. An idea sparked in my mind, and I grabbed it before it could slip away. A painting from me. I had the paints, I had the canvas, and I definitely had the motivation. I wanted to give Clara something unique, something you couldn't find on any high street. I let the concept settle in my mind, picturing the brush strokes and feeling the drag of bristles against canvas. It would be personal, and best of all, it would be free. Decision made. I knew I'd need every minute of every day if I wanted it to resemble the kind of art Clara admired. I pulled out my old easel, set it up in the living room, and got to work, all the while hoping my little slice of creativity would hold up in the high-stakes arena of business birthday gifts. Day 1. Operation Bombshell. I found myself standing in the middle of my makeshift studio, a corner of the dining room I cleared by pushing the table against the wall. The morning light streamed in, illuminating the chaos of art supplies scattered around. Mommy, what's all this? Lily, my 6-year-old, plopped herself right in the middle of the mess, her eyes wide as saucers, mirroring the splattered paint on the floor. Mommy's making a birthday present, sweetie, I replied, rifling through old brushes with bristles stiffer than my back. For a lady Daddy works with, she asked, picking up a brush and examining the crusty edges like a little professional. I snatched the brush from her before it turned into a makeshift sword or fairy wand. Yes, but I needed to stay nice, I explained. Lily furrowed her brow in confusion. But why can't Daddy just buy something? Lily, go watch your cartoons, okay? I need to think. I wasn't ready to unpack the complexities of our bank account or my marriage with a kindergartner. Burbling something under her breath that sounded far too much like me, she trotted off to the living room, leaving me to my dilemma. The week dragged on, and I found myself pulling double shifts. Daytime Mommy, nighttime Picasso. Slowly, the canvas began to fill, taking on a life of its own. Something abstract, something that captured the whirlwind of my life lately. I didn't hear a peep from Mark. Not a check-in call or even a text asking how things were going. I guess he was too wrapped up in his charts, deals, and whatever else was too important to bother his wife. Lily, on the other hand, was my tiny shadow, always creeping back to watch me paint. You're really good, Mommy, she said, Now on day 4, you should draw stuff more. I smiled. That was probably the best review I'd ever receive. Think so, huh? Maybe I will. The night before the big reveal, the painting finally stared back at me, complete. It wasn't just art, it was everything I hadn't been able to say or do, all poured onto the canvas. But I couldn't sleep that night, tossing and turning, my thoughts spiraling. What if Clara hated it? What if Mark thought I'd wasted my time? Morning arrived clear and bright, and the painting was wrapped, not in fancy paper, just brown parcel paper, neatly tied with a bow made from Lily's hair ribbons. Why not? At the boss's wife's birthday bash, I held the package tightly, hoping the painting would be a hit. I slid through the crowd, eyes down, wishing I could blend into the wallpaper. Mark was there, just foaming hot from his latest trip, looking every inch the man who had it all, except the picture-perfect trophy wife. His eyes swept over the polished women in their cocktail dresses before landing on me, and it felt like a ton of bricks had dropped. I saw that look on his face as if he'd just bitten into a lemon. He glanced me up and down and shook his head just enough for only me to notice. The room faded slightly, like someone turned down the volume on the party, leaving me with the sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then his gaze zeroed in on a package cradled in my trembling hands. His eyes flashed, and oh boy, I recognized that look. I sensed the storm brewing before he even spoke. "What's that?" he spat, barely keeping his anger in check. I pulled the package closer as if I could shield it and myself from the impending fallout. "It's a gift. My painting," I said, my words barely hanging in the air before he cut me off. "A painting? You're kidding, right?" His voice was loud enough to catch a few glances our way. I tried to shush him with my eyes, but he was beyond caring. "You actually think it's okay to hand her a piece of amateur hour?" Whispers began to swirl around us, soft at first, but growing stronger. "Mark, please, not here," I begged, my cheeks burning. "Did you lose your mind?" he roared, and the room didn't just pause, it froze. "You're making us look like fools." By now, we were the main event. Eyes flicked to us, then away, then back again, as if they were watching a tense game of tennis. I shrank, wishing I could melt into the floorboards. Mark's face was a shade of red I'd only seen on traffic lights. "Just great." "Grace," he vented, throwing his hands up. "You don't think, do you?" The heat flooding my cheeks told me I was blushing, and not in a cute way. My hands shook, but I clutched the painting tighter. What else could I hold on to? I took a deep breath, trying to remember why I thought this was a good idea. "Now everyone's going to have a go at us. Thanks to you and your dumb idea," he added, his words sharp as a knife, aimed at anyone pretending not to listen. My mouth opened, words ready to tumble out to defend myself or maybe just to tell him to shut up. But what could I say with the entire room's eyes burning into us? Instead, I just stood there, the fool he called me, wishing the ground would swallow me whole. The laughter that followed Mark's outburst felt like daggers. Even as the room spun, I caught the boss's eye. He was watching quietly, confusion etched on his face. Clara wore a half-concerned, half-intrigued frown, which gave me a sliver of hope. She waved her hand, cutting through the noise. "Quiet down, everyone. Let's see what Grace has brought." I moved on autopilot, my hands still jittery as they tore away the wrapping paper. The art spilled into the room, all the colors and shapes I had poured myself into for nights. Clara's eyebrows shot up. "Oh my," she said, and the room hushed, waiting for her judgment. "This is quite something, Grace." Mark was still fuming by my side. "Yeah, something all right." I ignored him, searching Clara's face for any sign of approval. "It's for you. Happy birthday." She tilted her head, studying the painting like it was a puzzle. "It's bold. I like bold. Don't you, darling?" She nudged Mark, pulling him into this. The boss was tough to read, but he nodded. "Don't see something like that every day." Mark tried to jump back in. "Oh, come on. You're saying you like this mess?" Clara's voice snapped as she turned to him with a squint. "Mark, I'd watch it if I were you. Your wife has talent, and I won't have you embarrass her any further. It's unbecoming." The room fell into a tense silence, the kind where you could hear a sneeze 3 houses down. "Look at the colors, the feeling in it," Clara continued. "Now it's got life." Mark attempted a save. "Well, sure, if you like that sort of thing." But Clara cut him off. "I do. It's decided. This goes right in the foyer." I blinked. Was this actually happening? "You sure, babe?" The boss chimed in. "It's not exactly." Clara shot him a look. and he trailed off. Standard? Right, it's unique. She extended her arm toward me like a beacon in her high heels and overpriced suit. See? Thank you, Grace. This here's a real gift, folks. It's got soul. Just like that, the murmurs started up again. But this time, they were different. People were nodding, some even looking at me with what felt like respect. Clara still held my painting like it was a treasure, turning her eyes back to me. So, Grace, she said, drawing the room's focus, ever thought about showing your work in a gallery? Mark let out a scoff. I heard it, but my eyes were glued to Clara. Nah, who'd want to see my stuff? Don't worry, Grace, I would, and I know people. Clara's voice was firm, her eyes sharp. Mark tried to laugh it off. Come on, Clara, she's just dabbling. Clara quirked an eyebrow at him. So she dabbles better than some pros I know. What's it to you? I swallowed, feeling like I was teetering on the edge of something big. I don't know. I've never. What's to know? You jump in, I'll help. Clara's look was commanding, not asking. A nervous giggle slipped from my lips, wild-sounding even to my own ears. Sure. Good. It's settled, then. After that, whispers flitted around like moths to a flame. People who barely gave me the time of day were now hanging on my arm, talking about my work. It felt surreal, like walking through someone else's life. Mark was suddenly there again, his hand on my back, almost scalding. You're not serious about this, are you? There was an edge in his voice, like a knife threatening to cut. I turned to him, feeling the weight of the crowd and the pull of something new. Yeah, I am. My voice was stronger than it had felt in years. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time that night. But what about us? What about us? I repeated. We've been over for longer than I want to admit. That shook him. He stepped back. I thought we were fine. I turned to face him fully. You thought wrong. The words were colder than I intended, but they needed to be said. Mark ran a hand through his hair, looking defeated. So what? We just end it. I glanced down at the color splash across my fingers at the rings that no longer meant what they were supposed to. We ended it a long time ago. Now we're just making it official. He didn't have anything to say to that. I watched him walk away, shoulders hunched. Clara's hand touched my shoulder. You okay, hon? I nodded. I am, thanks to you. She winked. What are friends for, right? And you, Grace, she paused, squeezing my shoulder. You're going to light up this town with your art. Just you wait. With that, I felt my heart start to hammer for a whole new set of reasons. Ahead of me, there wasn't just an ending. There was a beginning, painted in the boldest colors I could imagine. Lily and I. We'd be more than fine. We'd be us. Unapologetically, unfalteringly us. My name is Diana, and I grew up as the princess of a castle. My parents, bless their souls, had more wealth than some small countries, but they instilled in me the value of every penny. Money talks, but wisdom listens, my dad would say, while my mom insisted I learn to budget before I'd even knew how to spell. My luxurious life felt like a fairy tale, until it shattered. At 12, a private jet crash turned my story into a dark reality. Overnight, my grandmother took me in, and we moved to a modest home far removed from the opulence I once knew. This new life was different, where luxury lay in love and care, not material possessions. My inheritance was a distant promise, locked away until I turned 25. So I adapted, learned, and thrived under my grandmother's guidance. College became both my escape and my grounding. That's where I met Alex. He was as far from my world as one could get. A scholarship kid with a heart of gold and a wit sharp enough to cut through any pretense. We clicked in a way I never expected. Bringing him home to meet Grandma was nerve-wracking. I hadn't told him about my money. Better he doesn't know, at least not yet, Grandma advised, and I understood her wisdom. I wanted Alex to love me for who I was, not for my bank account. Grandma, this is Alex, I introduced them, feeling my stomach knot. Nice to meet you, ma'am, Alex said, extending his hand, which Grandma shook warmly. Sit, she urged, her eyes twinkling as she observed Alex's nervousness. So you're the young man who's stolen my granddaughter's heart. Alex blushed, a sheepish grin spreading across his face. Ah, I guess you could say that, ma'am. We sat down, and the conversation flowed more easily than I had dared hope. Grandma shared stories of my parents and my childhood that made Alex laugh and look at me with a warmth that swelled my heart. You've got a good one here, Grandma said, nodding at me while looking at Alex. takes after her mother, strong and kind. But don't let her fool you, she's got a bit of mischief in her too. I can see that, Alex chuckled, squeezing my hand under the table. The evening continued with laughter and shared stories, and Alex blended into our world as if he had always belonged. He even helped Grandma with the dishes afterward, and I felt certain I had made the right choice in bringing him into my life. As we walked out later, Alex turned to me, a serious look on his face. Your grandma's amazing, you know. Hearing about your parents and your life makes me feel like I understand you more. I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. I'm glad, Alex. There's a lot more to me than meets the eye. He smiled and pulled me into a hug. I'm here for all of it, every layer. It doesn't matter what's in your bank account, it's you I care about. I hugged him back tighter than ever before, feeling a rush of trust. But I also knew the weight of the secret I was keeping, a delicate balance I hoped wouldn't tip. The ride to Alex's parents' house was quiet, filled with a silence thick enough to cut through. I could tell Alex was nervous, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. Are you sure you're ready for this? I asked, trying to break the ice. Yeah, just, my mom can be a bit much. Don't take anything she says to heart, okay? His attempt at reassurance fell short. As we pulled up to the grand, imposing house, my stomach twisted into knots. This was it, no turning back now. We barely made it through the door when Alex's mom, Gloria, made her entrance. Her eyes landed on me like laser beams, sizing me up in a way that made my skin crawl. So, this is the girl you've been hiding, she said, her voice as cold as the marble floors. Mom, this is Alex, he started, but Gloria waved him off. I know who she is. Come, let's sit. I've prepared some tea. Gloria's command was firm, and I felt compelled to follow her as she led us into a living room that felt more like a showroom than a home. Once the tea was served, Gloria wasted no time getting to the point. I hear you were raised by your grandmother. Must have been quite a humble upbringing, she remarked, the word humble dripping with condescension. I clenched my jaw, fighting to remain calm. It was my grandmother who taught me valuable life lessons, important things, not just fluff. Gloria smirked, her lips curling slightly. And your parents? Gone too soon, I hear. Tragic, really. How does one cope without proper guidance? Alex jumped in, clearly uncomfortable. Mom, that's enough. Let's not. It's okay, Alex, I interrupted, feeling a surge of defiance. Yeah, my folks are gone, and it was tough. But I got through it. It made me who I am. Gloria sipped her tea, her gaze unwavering. Interesting. And what about your future, dear? Any plans, or are you just riding along on my son's coattails? That's done. I took a deep breath, reminding myself why I was there. I've got plans, big ones. And I don't need to ride anyone's coattails to make them happen. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel it tightening around us. Alex, bless him, tried to change the subject. Mom, let's not do this. We're here to enjoy each other's company. Gloria set down her teacup with a deliberate slowness. I'm merely trying to understand the woman my son has chosen. You can't fault a mother for caring about her child's future. It felt like a never-ending tug of war where neither side was winning. Just when I thought I couldn't endure any more, Alex's sister Lily made her entrance. Her curious eyes held an edge of judgment that mirrored their mother's. So, you're the famous girlfriend. Heard a lot about you, though not all of it good, Lily said, her voice dripping with disdain. I opened my mouth to snap back, but Alex stood up. That's enough. Both of you, we came here in good faith to share a part of our lives with you. If you can't respect that, then maybe we should leave. The rest of the visit was painfully awkward. Conversations felt forced, and every laugh was a little too loud. Yet Alex held my hand under the table, a silent promise that we were in this together. As we left, I couldn't shake the mix of relief and frustration churning inside me. I'm sorry about that, Alex said once we were in the car. They can be a bit intense. I sighed as the lights of the house faded in the rearview mirror. It's not your fault, but man, your mom and sister. There's something else, I said, shaking my head. Alex let out a sad chuckle. Yeah, they are. But hey, we survived, right? Survived and stronger. I leaned my head against the window, looking up at the clear night sky filled with shining stars. Maybe it was a sign, no matter how tough things got, there would always be a way through. But the warning came swift and sharp like a slap to the face at our next awkward family gathering. Gloria, my future mother-in-law, wasted no time laying down the law. "If you two are serious about getting married, we're getting a prenup signed," she declared, her eyes drilling into mine as if daring me to object. I kept my cool, shrugged, and replied, "Fine by me. I'm not after your son's money." I could see Alex shrink in his seat, looking as if he wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear. Once we were out of there, he was all apologies and promises. "My mom will get in our way. I promise we'll be happy," he said, his eyes pleading for me to believe him. The wedding planning sailed along smoothly enough, but on the big day itself, that's when the storm hit. Lily, my soon-to-be sister-in-law, got more than a little tipsy and decided it was showtime right in the middle of our reception. She staggered to her feet, glass in hand, slurring accusations loud enough for everyone to hear. "This one's a gold digger. Doesn't know the first thing about our kind of life. Illiterate, trying to snag my brother's cash." Her antics didn't stop there. She went on to harass guests with behavior that wasn't even fit for polite society. My face flushed with hot anger and humiliation. Without a second thought, I pulled out my phone and called the cops. This drama needed an audience, and I wasn't about to let Lily's performance go unchecked. The aftermath was a hurricane of accusations and threats. Gloria vowed revenge for the disgrace I had brought upon their family. "You've made a mockery of us. The press will have a field day with my daughter's antics, thanks to you." Alex was caught in the middle, trying to play peacemaker in a war that had no room for neutrality. I saw the strain in his eyes and the way his shoulders sagged under the weight of his family's drama. He wanted to keep us afloat, but I stood my ground, my resolve hardening. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about drawing a line and refusing to let wealth, or the lack thereof, dictate how I was treated. As the dust settled and the night grew quiet, Alex and I sat amidst the wreckage of what was supposed to be our happiest day. "I'm sorry," he whispered, but I could only think of how far we had to go. He whispered, his voice thick with unshed tears. "I never wanted any of this." I took his hand, feeling the rough edges of our new reality. "We'll get through this, but things need to change, starting with setting boundaries with your family." The vow we made that night wasn't just about staying together. It was about fighting for the respect we deserved and refusing to let old money or grudges define our future. 2 years slipped by since we said, "I do," and those vows felt heavier with each passing day. Gloria practically vanished from our lives, and honestly, I didn't miss her one bit. But it wasn't just her absence that marked those years. It was Alex's changing attitude that really drove a wedge between us. He came home late, if at all, muttering excuses about work that never quite added up. The warmth we once shared cooled into mere courtesy. And eventually, even that faded. The tipping point came one night when he threw his jacket on the chair as it had personally offended him. "You know," he said, "I could have done better, married someone with a bit more class, more in line with my circle." His words stung like a slap, leaving me gobsmacked. I wanted to scream, to remind him of the fortune I had inherited, but Grandma's voice echoed in my head, urging me to be patient and to see Alex for who he truly was. So, I swallowed my truth and my hurt, biting back tears. I thought maybe, just maybe, if we had a child, it might bridge the gap between us, remind him of the love that brought us together. "Alex, don't you think it's time we considered having a baby?" I ventured one evening, hoping to ignite something in the man I once loved. His reaction was like a cold shower. "A baby? Now, don't be ridiculous. We're not ready for that, not by a long shot." That conversation crushed me. It wasn't just his refusal. It was the disdain in his voice, the way he made it clear that what I wanted, what I thought could save us, was nothing but a foolish fantasy. Days turned into weeks, and those weeks into months of silence, living side by side but feeling more like strangers. Each rude remark, every late night, added another brick to the wall between us. I confided in Grandma, pouring my heart out over cups of tea that went cold before I could finish them. "He's not the man I married, Grandma. I don't even know if he ever was." She listened, her eyes reflecting sadness and understanding. "You can't make someone be who you want them to be, darling. Sometimes we see what we want to see until we can no longer ignore the truth." Her words, though heavy, carried a sliver of relief. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't asking for too much. I just wanted a partner, someone who saw me as an equal and respected me. But as the days passed, it became clear that Alex wasn't that person anymore, if he ever had been. The thought of leaving crossed my mind more times than I cared to admit, but every time it did, I pushed it away, hoping against hope that something would change, that the man I loved would find his way back to me. I went all out for Alex's birthday bash, hoping to reignite the spark in what had turned into a pretty mundane marriage. No expense was spared, and the guest list was a who's who of our closest friends. Notably absent were Gloria and Lily, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. Their drama was the last thing I needed to ruin the night. For a moment, Alex was in high spirits, soaking in the adoration and well wishes from everyone. It felt like we were back in our honeymoon phase, surrounded by laughter and inside jokes. But that bubble burst the second Gloria and Lily crashed the party uninvited, clearly expecting to be welcomed. It turned out Alex had gone behind my back and invited them, hoping to avoid any family fallout. Their presence shifted the atmosphere, turning it tense. Lily, in true form, made a beeline for the drinks, dressed in an outfit that practically screamed, "Look at me," and not in a good way. Gloria's snide remarks flew under the radar, each one a veiled jab at me or our marriage. As the night wore on, Lily's antics escalated, fueled by champagne and a desperate need to be the center of attention. She launched into a rant about how I didn't fit into their family, how I was unworthy of their name. It was a mess, and Alex was nowhere to be found, too busy playing the good son to notice the circus unfolding around him. The climax of the evening came when Lily, a few sheets to the wind, decided to air out some dirty laundry. Waving around some documents, she slurred out insults, each word cutting deeper. The spectacle ended with her stumbling into the pool, documents flying everywhere, turning what was meant to be a celebration into chaos. I rushed over, driven more by curiosity than concern, and began gathering the scattered papers. My heart sank as I pieced together the truth. They were divorce papers signed by Alex. Each signature felt like a punch to the gut, a betrayal that left me numb. Standing there, the reality crashed over me. My husband, the man I had promised to spend my life with, had decided our journey was over without even a word. The party around me faded into a blur as I clutched the documents, Alex's signature glaring up at me, confirming what I didn't want to believe. This wasn't just a party to remember. It was the end of everything I thought we had. In the aftermath of the pool incident, I sought clarity amidst the chaos. My heart raced as I approached Alex, holding the soaked documents that had unwittingly unveiled the truth I wasn't prepared for. "Alex, what's this about?" I demanded, my voice stronger than I felt as I thrust the divorce papers toward him. Before he could respond, his mother interjected, her smugness making my skin crawl. "Oh dear, looks like your little scheme didn't work out, did it? Alex is leaving you. You thought you could trap him with a baby for his money." I stared at Alex, searching his eyes for any trace of the man I married. But he couldn't meet my gaze. His silence spoke louder than words. With resignation, I signed the divorce papers. They were just a formality now, closing a chapter of a book I no longer wished to be part of. As the dust settled, Grandma approached, her presence a calming force. She didn't need to say anything. Her eyes conveyed volumes of empathy, understanding, and unspoken support that bolstered my resolve. Then she revealed the truth, not just to me but to everyone present. "She doesn't need any of your money," Grandma declared, her voice steady and strong. "In a month, she'll turn 25 and inherit a fortune far beyond what you could imagine. She's been raised to value people over wealth, to seek genuine connections rather than financial gain." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Gloria's face shifted from smugness to shock, then to a desperate greed as she scrambled to backpedal, her apologies transparent and insincere. Alex, too, suddenly seemed eager to rewrite the narrative, insisting his intentions had never been to hurt me, that he was merely influenced by his mother. But it was too late. The veil had been lifted, revealing the stark reality of our relationship and the motivations behind it. I met their apologies with a quiet smile, not out of forgiveness, but from a newfound inner peace that came from understanding my worth, independent of the wealth that awaited me. "You've shown me your true colors," I said, my voice imbued with strength. "And as for surprises, well, I've prepared another one for you." At that moment, a loud honk echoed through the tension outside. A sleek luxury car rolled up to the gate, the one I had secretly bought for Alex as a surprise. The irony wasn't lost on me. I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh as I excused myself to step outside and confront the final act of this drama. There it was, the epitome of luxury on four wheels, a symbol of the love I thought we shared. Now, just another piece in the game of pretense and betrayal. Without a second thought, I slid into the driver's seat, the leather cool and unyielding beneath me, much like my resolve. Grandma, ever my rock, joined me, her presence a silent testament to the strength and dignity that ran in our blood. Turning to face the house, I felt ready to take the next step. I spotted Alex and his mother at the door, their expressions a mix of confusion and disbelief. From now on, everything goes through my lawyer, I called out, my voice clear and stripped of the warmth it once held. And don't worry about my stuff, I'll have a courier pick it up. Their faces, once smug and self-assured, transformed into a portrait of realization and loss, not just of the wealth they coveted, but of the person they had underestimated. With that, I turned the key in the ignition, the car's engine purring to life, a sweet sound that promised freedom and new beginnings. Grandma and I exchanged a look, a silent agreement that this was the first step toward a future unburdened by deceit and manipulation. After the revelations and dramatic exits, the air felt clearer, as if the truth had not only exposed their greed but also cleansed the path ahead. It wasn't long before the first test of my newfound resolve came knocking, or rather, calling. The phone rang, its shrill tones slicing through the calm like a knife. On the other end was none other than Lily, her voice dripping with an unfamiliar sweetness. Hey, I just wanted to clear the air between us. We're practically the same age, right? We could be friends. I couldn't help but let out a short, disbelieving laugh. The contrast between her sugary tone and the disdain she usually exuded was striking. Friends? I echoed, the word feeling foreign. You mean like how friends don't badmouth each other at parties or try to humiliate each other in front of everyone? There was a pause, and I imagined the gears turning in her head as she searched for a response. Well, you know, water under the bridge and all that, she attempted feebly. Water into the pool, you mean? I shot back, unable to resist the jab. The silence that followed was telling. It was clear my refusal to play along had derailed her plans. Fine, be that way, she snapped, her veneer of niceness crumbling. You'll regret this. I hung up, feeling a mix of amusement and sadness, a stark reminder of the facades people wear and the lengths they'll go to when faced with the consequences of their actions. The temptation to retaliate lingered, a nagging thought in the back of my mind. I posted a video on social media of her falling into the pool, and it went viral like wildfire. Within an hour, 1,000 people had liked it. My sister-in-law became an internet sensation. She tried to call me, demanding I take it down, but I just blocked her. I was done with her fake sweetness and nasty attitude. A week later, my phone rang with a number I knew all too well. It was Gloria. Her voice was unnaturally sweet, offering an olive branch she hoped I would grasp. Let's put the past behind us for Alex's sake. Can't we reconcile? She suggested, as if the wounds were mere scratches that could heal with a band-aid of words. No, Gloria, that ship has sailed, I replied, firm but not unkind. There was no anchor in my voice, only a resolute peace. I wish Alex well, but our paths are diverging. I'm looking forward, not back. Not long after, Alex made his own attempts at reconciliation. One morning, I found a bouquet of flowers on my doorstep, the card bearing a simple, I'm sorry. Please come back. The sight of them sparked more anger than affection. Without a second thought, I tossed them into the trash. His efforts didn't stop there. He showed up unannounced, hoping to talk things through, but I wasn't the same person he had left behind. His presence, once a source of comfort, now felt like an intrusion. One evening, as he made yet another uninvited appearance, I met him at the door with a resolve as hard as steel. If you don't stop this, I'm going to the police, I warned, my voice steady and firm. Your apologies can't undo what's been done. It's over, Alex. Really, it's over. The gravity of my words finally seemed to reach him. His shoulders slumped, and with one last lingering look, he turned and walked away. That was the last I saw of him. In the time that followed, I immersed myself in charity work. It became my passion and my purpose. Helping those truly in need and connecting with people who valued kindness over wealth brought me a joy I hadn't known I was missing. Living with Grandma, I found peace in our quiet routine. We'd sit together, planning our next project, our next way to make a difference. During these moments, I realized this was where I was meant to be. I had no illusions about the road ahead. It would be fraught with challenges, perhaps even heartache. But I also knew it would be filled with joy, moments of unbridled happiness, and the kind of love that enriches the soul. So I live my life looking forward, not back. I work, I help, and I hope. I believe in a future where I'll find true love, not defined by wealth or status, but by genuine connection. And yes, one day I'll have those 3 beautiful children I dream of. For now, though, I'm content, building a life of purpose surrounded by love that asks for nothing in return. This isn't just the end of a chapter, it's the beginning of a whole new book, and I'm the one writing it. I'm Jane, and I had just turned 28 when I thought I had met the love of my life, Mike. Everything unfolded so quickly. We were married within a year of our first meeting. Mike, an accountant with a tall frame and a laugh that could brighten any room, complemented my career in digital marketing. I love painting on weekends and have always been a planner. We seemed to balance each other perfectly, or so I thought. The day after our wedding, our living room was a delightful mess, overflowing with wrapped gifts and cards, a beautiful chaos that reflected our celebration. Just then, Mike's parents, Carol and Dave, unexpectedly dropped by. I hadn't had much chance to get to know them since our wedding had come together so fast, but they appeared perfectly normal. As we began to open gifts, I noticed Carol and Dave were more than a little curious about what we were unwrapping. "Is that a crystal vase?" Carol asked, picking up a shimmering piece that my Aunt Linda had given us. She turned it over in her hands, her eyes sparkling with interest. "Yeah, it's from my Aunt Linda. Pretty, isn't it?" I replied, hoping to steer her attention away from claiming it. But before I knew it, Carol had set the vase aside in a separate pile. "I think we can find a good place for this at our house," she said casually. Mike, engrossed in untangling a set of fancy kitchen gadgets from his cousin, didn't seem to notice. I shot him a pleading look, hoping he would intervene. "Mom, that's our wedding gift," Mike finally said with an easy smile, as if it were all a big joke. "Oh, come on, it'll just gather dust here. We'll use it," Dave chimed in, wrapping an arm around Carol. "Besides, you two are young. You'll get plenty more gifts over the years." I tried to laugh along, but it felt off. "Actually, I think it would look great in our foyer," I said, attempting to reclaim it without making a scene. Carol glanced at me, her expression a mix of surprise and annoyance. "Jane, you need to learn to share. We're family now, and families help each other out," she said firmly, as if imparting some kind of lesson. Catching the rising tension, Mike quickly jumped in. "Let's not worry about this now. We've got plenty of gifts, right, Jane?" I nodded, biting back my frustration. Yet as they continued to sift through the gifts, setting aside a few choice items for themselves, that uncomfortable feeling settled deeper in my stomach. It felt like I was watching strangers claim pieces of my life as their own, and Mike simply let it happen. Our first year of marriage flew by, and before I knew it, our anniversary had arrived. I wanted to make it special, a true celebration of us. So I booked a table at Chez Louis, a cozy little spot we both loved. I thought it would be romantic to invite Mike's parents to join us, wanting to show them they were important to us. When we arrived at the restaurant, Carol and Dave were already seated, menus in hand. "This place is fancy," Carol remarked, eyeing the chandeliers above. Mike squeezed my hand under the table, a silent thank you for organizing the evening. As the waiter approached, I ordered salmon, Mike's favorite, and noticed Carol's eyes scanning the menu for the most expensive items. "We'll have the lobster in the filet mignon," she declared, pointing at the priciest options without a second thought. "Why not throw in a bottle of your best wine?" Dave added, winking at the waiter. I felt my smile stiffen. "Quite the celebration, huh?" I tried to keep my tone light. "It's a special night," Mike said with a shrug. "Let's not think about the cost." While the conversation was generally light-hearted, I couldn't shake the feeling that Carol and Dave were indulging like it was their last meal, almost oblivious to the hefty bill that would soon arrive. As we ate, I was consumed by a sense of being taken advantage of. It wasn't about the money, not really, it was the principle. This was our anniversary, and it felt as if it was being hijacked. When the check finally came, I braced myself for the awkward moment ahead. I noticed Mike's eyes widen for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure and handed his card to the waiter. As we left the restaurant, Carol linked her arm through mine. "You know, Jane, this was lovely. We should do it again next year," she said, a satisfied smile on her face. With Thanksgiving approaching, the holiday season was just around the corner. Mike and I had started decorating our home, blending warm fall colors with early Christmas cheer. It felt cozy, like a place you'd want to return to after a long day. One evening, while we were stringing lights around the living room windows, Mike's phone pinged with a message. He read it and chuckled. "Oh, my parents are ahead of the game. They've already sent their Christmas wish list." I paused, untangling a set of lights, and looked up. "A wish list?" "Yeah, They send one every year. It helps with shopping, he explained, scrolling through his phone. Curiosity got the best of me. So, what's on this famous list? Mike hesitated for a moment before handing me his phone. The list was extensive: top-tier electronics, designer clothes, luxury items that seemed completely unnecessary. I scrolled through in disbelief. "They can't be serious," I exclaimed. "This is a lot." Taking back his phone, Mike shrugged. "They like the good stuff. What can I say?" I was at a loss for words. A knot formed in the pit of my stomach. Mike's birthday was also approaching, and I had been eagerly planning to gift him the watch he had been eyeing for months. Now, it felt as if any gift I gave would be overshadowed by this extravagant list. When it came to making our own lists, I couldn't shake the feeling of pettiness. "Maybe we should just ask for charitable donations in our name," I suggested half-heartedly. Mike laughed. "Good one. But seriously, what do you want? You need a new laptop, right?" As the holidays rolled around, I bought Carol and Dave a nice coffee maker. Not too fancy, but practical. In return, they gave me a set of scented candles. They were lovely, but the contrast was stark. I didn't say anything. Mike seemed pleased with the expensive drone they gifted him, but the unspoken rule was clear. We were expected to give lavishly and receive modestly. It didn't feel right, but I held my tongue, wrapping gifts and plastering a smile on my face for the holidays. Inside, though, I began to tally the costs, not just in dollars, but in the emotional toll it was taking on me. One day, while staring at my computer screen at work, an email notification popped up. It was my quarterly bonus, bigger than I had anticipated. My first thought was to do something meaningful with it, something for Mike and me. So, I booked us a trip to Paris. We had talked about going since we met, and it felt like the perfect moment to make that dream a reality. That night, as we sat down for dinner, I couldn't wait to share the news. I excitedly told Mike about the surprise trip, and his face lit up in a way I had never seen before. "Paris? Really, babe? That's amazing," he exclaimed, jumping up to kiss me. I was basking in the joy of the moment when his phone rang. It was his mom. I could see the change in his expression immediately. "Yeah, she booked us a trip to Paris," he said into the phone, and I instantly regretted not asking him to keep it quiet for a little while longer. As he listened, his enthusiasm slowly waned. I know, you've always wanted to go," he trailed off, looking at me with a pained expression. My heart sank. After hanging up, a heavy silence enveloped us. "They want to come with us," he said finally, almost as if seeking my approval. I froze, my fork hovering midair. "To Paris with us?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, they said they've never been and have always wanted to go," Mike explained, running a hand through his hair. "I think we should take them." Suddenly, the room felt too small. "It's supposed to be for us, Mike, our trip," I said, feeling the tightness in my chest. He didn't respond right away. "I know, but they're getting older, and I feel bad. They've done so much for me." I thought about all the one-sided gift exchanges, the anniversary dinners, and every little thing that had accumulated over the past year. "But this is our time," I insisted, my voice firm. "We can plan a trip with them another time. This bonus is for us." Mike let out a deep, frustrated sigh. "They won't understand that. You know how they are. And you know how hard I've worked for this." I spoke the words like stones lodged in my throat. "I want us to enjoy it together, just us, like we planned." After a moment of silence, he finally relented. "Okay, we'll tell them some other time might work better." But when the moment came to break the news, Mike hesitated. "Look, maybe we can all go together next year," he suggested, but Carol was having none of it. "Why next year? We can afford it now," she retorted over the speakerphone, her voice tinged with disappointment. I could no longer hold back my frustration. "Because this trip is for us, Carol. Mike and I need this time together," I said, my voice rising. There was a pause before she replied, "Well, that's very selfish of you, Jane. Very selfish indeed." After the call, the air between Mike and me was thick with tension. I could tell he was torn, but I was resolute. Paris was meant to be a dream trip for just the two of us, and I wouldn't let that dream slip away. In the following days, Mike became a shadow in his own home, leaving early for work and returning late. Our conversations dwindled to monosyllables. Dinner's in the oven. I would call out when I heard the garage door open, my voice echoing off the empty walls. "Thanks," he'd reply, the word hanging between us like a ghost. I missed him, missed us. I longed for the easy days when we would dream together on the couch, our plans and laughter intertwined. I yearned to reach out to him, to break through the invisible barrier that had formed after our argument about Paris. But every attempt felt like trying to speak through thick glass. I could see him, but I couldn't connect. One particularly difficult evening, I found myself sitting across from Mike at the dinner table, the sound of his fork scraping against the plate cutting through the heavy silence. I cleared my throat. "Mike, this can't go on," I began, my voice barely above a whisper, fearful of shattering the fragile peace between us. "We need to talk about what happened. We can't let this silence become our new normal." Mike continued eating, his expression unreadable, until he finally set down his fork. It was a sign I had his attention, even if just for a moment. "What do you want me to say, Jane?" he asked, a hint of wariness seeping through his words. "I want to understand why you're taking this so hard. It feels like you're choosing them over me," I replied, hurt evident in my tone. He sighed, folding his hands in front of him. "They're my parents, Jane. They've always dreamed of going to Paris." "And what about our dreams?" I pressed, frustration bubbling up inside me. "What about our plans?" Mike ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of exasperation that had become all too familiar. I know, he said, and for a brief moment, I caught a glimpse of the man I married, conflicted and torn, but not indifferent. "It's just, they've always been there for me. I feel obligated." "But where does that leave us, Mike?" I leaned forward, desperate to catch his eye. "What about our marriage?" He hesitated, and in that pause, fear washed over me. What if we weren't as solid as I had believed? What if the foundation we built was more like sand, easily eroded by the tide of his parents' needs? "It's supposed to be us against the world, Mike, not me against you and them," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the emotions swelling inside me. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I could see the conflict warring within him. "I know, Jane. I just don't know how to make everyone happy." And then it hit me with sudden clarity. That's just it. We can't always make everyone happy, but we made vows to each other, Mike. Doesn't that count for something? He nodded slowly, his gaze lingering on the table before finally meeting mine. "It does. It counts for a lot." The rest of the meal passed in contemplative silence, a welcome change from the strained quiet that had become our norm. It felt as if my words had planted a seed, or perhaps nurtured one that had been dormant within Mike all along. As the morning sun poured in through the windows, I noticed that the warmth it usually brought seemed to have no place in our home today. I woke up to an eerie stillness. The other side of the bed lay untouched from the night before, and the emptiness of the house felt like a heavy blanket, suffocating in its silence. Rubbing the sleep from my eyes, I reached for my phone, expecting the usual void of messages that had taken residence in our home. Instead, my screen lit up with a flood of notifications, each one from my bank. A lump formed in my throat as I scanned the details. Multiple transactions, including airline tickets and hotel bookings in Paris, all made while I was asleep. The timestamps on the emails revealed that the flight had left hours ago. Mike and his parents were already on their way to Paris, using my hard-earned bonus to fund a trip I was meant to be on. Disbelief morphed into anger, and then a crushing sense of betrayal settled in. I sat there, the phone heavy in my hand, as the reality sank in. Mike had access to my account. I had trusted him implicitly, never imagining he would betray that trust. Yet here it was, stark in black and white, a digital paper trail of deceit. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The one person I had believed would stand by me had chosen his own comfort over our relationship. Memories flooded back, reminding me of all the little signs I had brushed aside, all the excuses I had made for him and for us. With trembling fingers, I dialed his number, fully aware he wouldn't answer, not with the time difference and not with my previous ultimatum ringing in his ears. "Mike," I began, only to be met by the cheerful beep of his voicemail, which felt almost mocking. "I saw the charges. You took your parents to Paris with my bonus. I don't even know what to say, but I hope it's worth it. I hope it's worth everything." The house felt even emptier after the call, the walls closing in on me under the weight of everything left unsaid, and now perhaps never to be spoken. I sat at the kitchen table, the silence a stark contrast to the chaos raging within me. They had left just like that, with no regard for me or the life we were supposed to be building together. I canceled the hotel rooms and the return flights, severing every piece of the trip tied to my finances. With each cancellation, I felt fragments of my old life slipping away, the future I had envisioned evaporating before my eyes. By the time I finished, There was nothing left to do but act. I contacted the bank and revoked Mike's access to my accounts, feeling the terrifying yet liberating finality with each click. The man I had married, the family I had tried to be a part of, they were all strangers now. Strangers who had used me, seeing my generosity as something to exploit rather than cherish. I packed my bags with a robotic efficiency, each item a reminder of a dream I had to put away. There was no going back from this. No gentle words or apologies could mend the rift his betrayal had caused. Mike had chosen his path, and in doing so, he had set me on mine. The ring I had once worn with pride lay cold and heavy in my palm. I set it down on the counter, its sparkle mocking me in the morning light. With one last look at the life I was leaving behind, I closed the door on the house that had never truly felt like home. It was late afternoon when I finally drove away, my car packed with clothes and essentials, a stark reminder of the sudden turn my life had taken. As I hit the road, messages began to flood in, one from Mike, several from his mother. I pulled over to read the messages, knowing they would only fuel my resolve. Mike's message flashed on the screen. "Jane, please, we need to talk about this. Can't we just discuss it?" The simplicity of his words felt almost insulting. I started to type a response but stopped, realizing that no words could bridge the chasm between us. His mother's messages were a confusing mix of anger and concern. "What's going on? Why have you canceled our rooms? Call me." I could picture her sitting in a Paris cafe, expecting luxury but facing complications. Frustrated, I turned my phone off. They were in the middle of a trip funded by Deceit. They could figure it out. My first stop was the bank. I needed to ensure my finances were completely secure. The bank manager, a middle-aged woman with a gentle demeanor, greeted me. "I need to make sure all my accounts are locked down. My husband won't have access anymore," I explained, my voice steady despite the emotions churning within me. "Of course," she nodded, offering a sympathetic smile. "Let's make sure you're protected." By the time I left the bank, my accounts were secure, and a new sense of determination settled within me. I drove to my sister's house, the only place I felt safe. She opened the door before I could even knock. "Jane, I've been so worried," she said, pulling me into a hug. I allowed myself a moment to be held, letting the weight of my reality be shared. "I can't believe he would do this to you," she said as we sat down at her kitchen table. "You deserve so much better." I nodded, swallowing hard against the lump in my throat. "I do, and that's why I'm not going back. I've canceled everything. I've left the house. I'm done." Sarah reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "Good for you. What's your plan now?" I looked around the familiar room, feeling the first twinges of relief. "I'm not sure yet, but I'm starting with a divorce. I can't stay married to someone who has so little respect for me." Her face was a mix of anger and pride. "I'll support you however I can. Do you need a lawyer?" "I'll find one," I said, my voice growing firmer with each word. "Need someone who doesn't know Mike or his family. I need this cut clean." The conversation shifted as Sarah helped me unpack my card and plan the next few days. There was a strange comfort in the mundane tasks, a grounding in the midst of chaos. I was standing in her kitchen, a mug of coffee warming my hands, when my phone vibrated persistently. It was Mike again. "Jane, we need to talk. I'm sorry. I miss you, and I think we can work things out." His text was a blend of apology and plea. I sighed, feeling the same rehearse "I'm sorry" becoming a threadbare blanket that offered no comfort. "Not this time, Mike," I muttered under my breath, typing a response that left no room for ambiguity. "There's nothing left to discuss. Please respect my decision." I could almost hear his desperation in the silence that followed, but it wasn't enough to make me reconsider. Not anymore. My resolve was tested further a few days later when Mike's parents made a dramatic appearance at my sister's doorstep. Their faces twisted in anger as they barged past Sarah, who stood wide-eyed at the door. "You've got some nerve, Jane," his mother exclaimed, her voice shrill. "You ruined our family vacation. You're just a greedy, selfish woman." Sarah stepped in front of me, protective. "That's enough. You're not going to come into my house and insult my sister." The argument escalated, drawing the attention of neighbors peeking out from their windows. I was sure someone would call the police. It ended with Sarah threatening to do just that if they didn't leave. The departure left a sour air that lingered long after they were gone. But amidst the chaos, a realization settled within me. I was truly done. The divorce process felt like a cold legal ballet, and I danced my part, signing papers and nodding through explanations of settlements and divisions. Yet with each stroke of the pen, I felt chains breaking and tethers loosening. And then it was over. I stood outside the courthouse, a free woman. The air was crisp, a gentle wind playing with the loose strands of my hair. Sarah, be tight, her support unwavering. You did it, Jane, she whispered, pride evident in her voice. I had stood up to the selfishness that tried to claim me, resisting the manipulation that sought to bind me. I turned away from the courthouse, away from a past that no longer held me. The messages from Mike continued for a while, a mix of apologies, bargaining, and eventually anger. But they went unread, floating in the digital void as I moved forward with my life. The apartment I rented was small, but filled with sunlight. I decorated it with plants, books, and new memories. I went back to school, enrolling in classes that fueled a passion for learning I had neglected for too long. One quiet evening, as I sat on my little balcony with a cup of tea in hand, I deleted Mike's number from my phone. I was free to heal, free to grow, and most importantly, free to be unapologetically me. I wasn't really searching for love at 28. I was too focused on my career as a rising star at my finance firm. Spreadsheets were my love language, and my cubicle felt more like home than any bar or dating app could ever offer. Then came Sarah's rooftop party. Sarah, my coworker and best friend, had a talent for pulling me out of my comfort zone. This time, the crowd was a mix of artists, musicians, and a few familiar faces from the office. That's when I spotted him. He was engaged in a playful debate with another guy about the best way to restore a brick building. Tall and lean, with kind eyes and tousled dark brown hair, he wore a weathered leather jacket over a faded band t-shirt, definitely the opposite of my usual buttoned-up crowd. Yet something about him intrigued me. So, you think slapping a fresh coat of paint on history is a good idea? He asked, a playful smile on his lips. The other guy, a stocky dude with a shaved head, rolled his eyes. Hey, it preserves the structure, right? Yeah, but it erases the character, he countered. The cracks and the wear, that's what tells the story. I found myself inching closer, drawn to their easy banter. Just then, Sarah appeared beside me, a mischievous glint in her eyes. Amelia, this is Mark, she said, nudging me forward. Mark, this is Amelia, the spreadsheet wizard I told you about. Mark's smile widened as he took me in. Spreadsheet wizard, huh? Sounds impressive. It pays the bills, I replied, feeling a blush creep up my cheeks, but I can hold my own in a conversation that doesn't involve amortization schedules. I winked at Sarah, who chuckled. Challenge accepted, Mark said, his voice warm and inviting. So, Amelia the spreadsheet wizard, what do you think about preserving history? We ended up talking for hours about everything and nothing. He was an architect passionate about breathing new life into old buildings, while I shared stories of my crazy hours at the firm and the thrill of closing a big deal. The conversation flowed effortlessly, and before we knew it, we found ourselves standing by the railing overlooking the glittering city skyline. The cool air sent goosebumps prickling down my arms. This is fun, I admitted, surprised by the slight tremor in my voice. Yeah, he agreed, his gaze fixed on the city below. I wouldn't mind doing this again sometime. Me neither, I blurted out, unable to overthink it. Our first official date was a dinner with Mark's parents, Martha and Arthur, at a fancy restaurant. The conversation flowed easily at first, revolving around wedding plans, the beautiful old library venue I had booked, and the expensive organic caterer I was stressing over. Then, things took a strange turn. Mid-bite of her lobster bisque, pronounced with a peculiar accent, Martha suddenly fixed me with a steely gaze. So, Amelia, she said, dabbing her lips with a napkin, Mark tells me you work in finance. Yes, I'm a financial analyst at a large firm downtown, I replied, unsure where this was heading. Analyst, huh? Sounds important, Arthur chimed in, his booming voice filling the table. Mark, who had been mostly quiet, cleared his throat. Dad, come on, that's not what we're talking about. Just making conversation, son, Arthur said, waving his hand dismissively before turning back to me. So, Amelia, you mentioned a big-name firm. I told him the name, a global player in the financial world. A satisfied smile spread across Martha's face. Excellent, she declared. And you say you do well for yourself? Investments, stocks, that kind of thing. Yes, I manage a portfolio, I replied, feeling increasingly uncomfortable. This felt more like an interrogation than a casual dinner with my future in-laws. A portfolio, huh? Martha leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. How much are we talking about here, dear? My jaw dropped. This was outrageous. No one asked questions like that. I glanced at Mark, hoping he'd intervene, but he just fiddled with the breadbasket, avoiding my gaze. That's really personal information, Mrs. Miller, I said, forcing a smile. Oh, come on, honey, Martha huffed. We're practically family now, isn't that right, Mark? Mark mumbled something non-committal, his cheeks flushed. I decided to take control of the situation. Look, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, money isn't everything. Mark and I love each other, and that's what matters most. Love is great, sweetheart, Arthur chimed in again, but let's face it, love doesn't pay the bills. I took a deep breath. This dinner was turning into a disaster. Maybe we should stick to talking about the wedding, I suggested, desperately trying to redirect the conversation. The following morning, I called my grandma right after I got off the phone with her. As I recounted the awkward dinner with Mark's parents, a wave of doubt washed over me. Her words about greedy and selfish people echoed in my mind, but I dismissed them. Grandma could be a bit old-fashioned at times. Sure, Martha and Arthur were blunt, but they genuinely seemed happy for us. Maybe they just struggled to express their emotions. Fast forward a few months, and the wedding planning was in full swing. Every detail, from the venue to the flowers, felt like pulling teeth. Whenever money came up, Mark would give a sheepish shrug and say, "Work's been a bit tight lately." His parents, bless their hearts, kept offering suggestions, cheaper venues outside the city, a family friend who could cater at a discount, which really meant they'd barter for vegetables from their neighbor's garden. In the end, I found myself footing most of the bill. Mark, ever the charmer, would say things like, "You're amazing, honey," handling everything like a champ. But his lack of financial contributions started to grate on me. Finally, the big day arrived. It was beautiful. The weather cooperated, the food was delicious, and most importantly, Mark and I said, "I do." The only sour note was Grandma. After the ceremony, she pulled me aside, her wrinkled face etched with concern. "Amelia, honey," she said, her voice low, "be careful with those in-laws of yours. They don't have your best interests at heart." I rolled my eyes. Here we go again. "Grandma, they're just excited. They love Mark. They love me. Everything's fine." The honeymoon phase barely lasted a week before the first major in-law incident occurred. It was a lazy Sunday morning, and Mark and I were still luxuriating in bed when a loud thump from downstairs shattered the peaceful silence. We exchanged confused glances, and Mark mumbled, "Probably the mail." But that thump was soon followed by a cacophony of rustling paper and muffled exclamations. Throwing on our robes, we hurried downstairs, only to find a scene that looked straight out of a horror movie. Well, a horror movie filled with floral wrapping paper and gaudy gift bags. Martha and Arthur were sprawled on the living room floor, surrounded by our wedding presents like vultures picking over a carcass. They were tearing into boxes, oohing and ahhing over some items while dismissively tossing others aside. "What in the world is going on here?" I demanded, disbelief lacing my voice. Martha, mid-unwrapping, looked up and flashed a megawatt smile. "Amelia, darling, just admiring your lovely wedding gifts." "Admiring," I sputtered. "It looks more like you're ransacking the place." Arthur held up a crystal vase, squinting at it. "Relax, sweetheart. Just sorting things out. Can't have all this clutter lying around, can we?" "Clutter," I exclaimed, incredulous. These were gifts chosen with love by our friends and family. Before I could voice my outrage, Mark interjected, "Maybe they should just leave the presents unopened, right?" His tone was mild, but the message was clear. I chimed in. Rael wasn't completely oblivious. Martha scoffed. "Don't be silly, honey. It's rude not to open presents. Besides," she added, her eyes gleaming, "we might find something truly special in here." Special for them, I thought bitterly, watching in growing frustration as they picked through our wedding gifts, setting aside anything that caught their fancy. A silver picture frame, a set of engraved wine glasses, a fancy cheese board. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "These are our wedding gifts," I said, my voice firm. "Not yours to take." "Look, honey," Martha replied, her tone dripping with fake sweetness. "We just saw some things that would look lovely in our new house. You know, the one we're decorating." They were redecorating with our wedding gifts. The anger bubbled up inside me, threatening to spill over. "What about the gift you got us?" I asked, my voice tight. Martha paused, her hand hovering over a box wrapped in fancy floral paper. She rummaged through the pile and finally pulled out a small, oddly shaped package. With a flourish, she handed it to me. I unwrapped it slowly, my heart sinking with each layer of tissue paper. Inside was a cheap glass statuette, the kind you find at a discount store, adorned with garish plastic flowers. My stomach churned. This was their idea of a wedding gift. Maybe Grandma was right. Maybe I had married into a nightmare. The wedding gift incident was just the tip of the iceberg. Martha's shopping sprees became a regular occurrence. She'd call, all chipper, asking me to join her for a girls' day out. But it was really just code for me being her unpaid personal shopper. We'd browse stores, and inevitably, Martha would find something she absolutely had to have. At checkout, she'd do this weird shuffle with her purchases and mine, muttering about forgetting her wallet and how inconvenient it was to have separate bags. By the time the cashier figured it all out, I'd be stuck paying for both our stuff. Arthur wasn't much better. Weekends were his prime visiting time. He'd waltz in unannounced, plop himself down on the couch, and proceed to spend the entire day glued to the TV, inhaling whatever snacks I had on hand. When I finally mustered the courage to ask him why he spent so much time at our place, he looked at me with a straight face and said, "Saves money on groceries and electricity, doesn't it?" The audacity of the man. Did he think we were running a charity? Mark, ever the peacekeeper, just rolled his eyes and muttered something about Dad needing some company. But the birthday dinner was the final straw. I decided to treat myself to a nice night out at a fancy restaurant to celebrate another year older and hopefully wiser. Naturally, I invited Martha and Arthur. A big mistake. The menu was a bewildering array of French names and unfamiliar ingredients, but undeterred, Martha and Arthur ordered the most expensive dishes, pronouncing them with a confidence that masked their complete lack of knowledge. Halfway through the meal, Martha pushed her plate away, declaring that the escargot was too slimy. Arthur, meanwhile, choked on a mouthful of bouillabaisse, spraying saffron broth across the table. The entire evening was a disaster. By the time the bill arrived, my blood pressure was through the roof. The cost of that meal could have fed us for a month. And guess who offered to chip in? Nope, not Mark. He just sat there, oblivious, while I choked out a strained thank you to the waiter and reached for my credit card. Back home, fuming and frustrated, I finally confronted Mark. "How can you just let your parents walk all over you like that?" I demanded. "Come on, babe," he said dismissively. "It's not a big deal. They're just, like that." "Like what?" "Selfish and entitled." I shot back. "Mark, this isn't okay." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Look, I love you, but you've got to pick your battles. My parents are, well, my parents. They're not going to change." Maybe he was right. Perhaps I had been naive, hoping to change them, to somehow mold them into the in-laws I'd always dreamed of. But the reality was staring me in the face. Martha and Arthur were who they were, and that wasn't going to change. The birthday dinner debacle was a turning point, but it wasn't the end. Their gift-giving strategy became painfully clear. Shower us with cheap, impersonal trinkets on holidays and expect extravagant presents in return. A framed picture of a lighthouse for Christmas. Try a top-of-the-line espresso machine for Mother's Day. According to Martha's logic, any hint at the unbalanced value of gifts resulted in a lecture about family and not keeping score. My grandma, bless her soul, wouldn't dream of asking for anything. Every time I'd inquire about a holiday gift, she'd brush it off with, "Honey, I have everything I need. Just come visit. That's all that matters." Meanwhile, Martha and Arthur treated gift-giving like a competitive sport. They show up unannounced, a triumphant glint in their eyes, brandishing their latest treasures. A chipped ceramic fruit bowl for Christmas, a set of mismatched oven mitts decorated with faded cartoon cats for Valentine's Day. Each offering felt like a slap in the face. The final insult came on Thanksgiving that year. I had opted for a quiet night in just Mark and me. Maybe we'd order some takeout and watch a movie. But of course, Martha and Arthur had other plans. They barged in, laden with shopping bags, their faces plastered with self-satisfied grins. "Happy Thanksgiving, sweetie," Martha trilled, thrusting a brightly wrapped package at me. I unwrapped it, my stomach sinking. Inside was a gaudy scarf, the kind you might find at a gas station gift shop. The flowers were fake and plastic, and the fabric felt like sandpaper against my skin. "It's perfect, isn't it?" Martha beamed. It matches your new coat perfectly. I forced a smile. The coat in question was a vintage find I'd scored at a thrift store. The scarf, however, clashed spectacularly. "Thanks, Martha," I mumbled, trying to mask my disappointment. Meanwhile, Arthur was holding up a small box. "And for you, son," he declared, "a little something to help you unwind after a long day at work." Mark's eyes lit up as he eagerly tore into the box, revealing a pack of cheap drugstore cigars, the kind that smelled like dirty ashtrays and regret. "Thanks, Dad," Mark said, a genuine smile spreading across his face. That was it, the final straw. Here I was, staring at a birthday gift that insulted my taste and a husband who seemed more excited about a pack of drugstore cigars than his wife's well-being. Anger simmered inside me, threatening to boil over. But instead of exploding, I did something completely unexpected. I took a deep breath, forced a smile, and thanked them for the lovely gifts. A glimmer of hope arrived with my work performance. I landed a coveted quarterly award and a hefty bonus that practically screamed, "Celebrate." Venice, with its romantic canals and rich history, had always been a dream destination. Knowing I spoke fluent Italian sealed the deal. This trip would be a chance to reconnect with Mark and escape the suffocating grip of his parents for a while. Except news travels fast, especially bad news to eager ears. Upon learning of our travel plans, Martha and Arthur descended like hungry vultures. "Venice, huh?" Martha said, her eyes gleaming with a disturbing avarice. "Sounds delightful. Always wanted to see those gondolas up close." "Actually," I interjected, trying to be polite, "this trip is just for Mark and me. A little romantic getaway." Arthur scoffed. "Come on, Amelia, don't be selfish. We've never been to Europe, let alone Venice. Think of the pictures." Pictures. This wasn't about a photo op with gondolas. It was about escaping their smothering presence. "I'm sorry, but," I said, my voice firm, "this is a trip for two." My polite refusal triggered a meltdown of epic proportions. They called me selfish and greedy, accusing me of trying to alienate Mark from his family. The worst part, Mark, ever the peacekeeper, didn't stand up for me. Instead, he mumbled something about maybe they could come along and that it wouldn't be that bad. That's when I realized this wasn't just about a trip anymore. This was about boundaries, respect, and whether our marriage could survive his parents' constant intrusion. I looked at Mark, my voice laced with ice. "Absolutely not. This is our trip, and they are not invited." The fight that followed was brutal. Harsh words were exchanged, and accusations flew like daggers. By the end, a heavy silence settled between us. We retreated to opposite ends of the apartment, a cold war brewing in our once happy home. Days blurred together, and the silence in the apartment was a constant reminder of the chasm that had opened between Mark and me. I didn't call his parents. The mere thought of their entitled whining made my stomach churn. Mark remained in his self-imposed exile. The only communication between us was a muted good morning in the kitchen each day. Then, on a random Saturday morning, I woke up to an empty apartment and a sinking feeling in my gut. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, the notification sound grating on my nerves. Glancing at it, my blood ran cold. Airline ticket confirmations, 3 of them to Venice, purchased from my account. Panic clawed at my throat. No, it couldn't be. But as I scrolled through the confirmations, the sickening truth settled in. Mark, with the audacity of a seasoned thief, had used my trusted access to our bank account to book not only his own ticket to Venice, but 2 more for his precious parents. Hotel reservations were also courtesy of my hard-earned money. It confirmed my suspicions. He'd gone behind my back, completely disregarding my feelings, and booked a vacation for himself and his leech-like family with my money. The anger, hot and furious, burned away any remaining affection I have for him. My fingers flew across the screen, canceling the return flights and hotel rooms. Next, with steely resolve, I revoked Mark's access to my bank account. It was a small act of defiance in the face of their colossal selfishness. A few hours later, my phone erupted with a call. Mark's name flashed on the screen, but I let it go to voicemail. The notification arrived a moment later, his voice laced with panic and fury. "Amelia, where the hell are you? We're supposed to be checking into the hotel. What did you do with the tickets?" I deleted the message without listening. Then came a barrage of texts from both Mark and Martha, a mix of demands, accusations, and veiled threats. Mark's final message sent a dark chill rippling through me. "If you don't give me back access to the account and get us on that damn plane, Amelia, we're done. Consider this your divorce notice." With newfound clarity, I started making my own plans. I contacted a lawyer, and with each step toward independence, the weight lifted from my shoulders. Mark's divorce notice might as well have been a gift. I didn't wait for him to waltz back in with his tail between his legs. Packing was cathartic. Clothes went into suitcases, knickknacks into boxes. But the gifts from Martha and Arthur, those gaudy trinkets and mismatched sets, I left untouched. I lined them up on the living room floor, a Giddish monument to their selfishness. A final act of defiance before I slammed the door shut on that chapter of my life. Grandma's house, with its familiar scent of cinnamon rolls and worn furniture, felt like a warm hug. Tears streamed down my face as I recounted the entire ordeal, the hurt and anger spilling out like a dam breaking. Grandma listened patiently, a sad smile on her lips. "I told you, honey," she said softly, her voice laced with a hint of "I told you so," but mostly concern. "Sometimes you've got to learn things the hard way." "I know," I said, newfound determination settling in my voice. "Maybe this is a good thing. Now I know what to look for, what to avoid." A few days later, a knock on the door shattered the peace of the afternoon. My heart lurched, but before I could react, Grandma ushered me toward the back room. Peeking through the curtain, I saw Mark standing there, looking lost and dejected. "Amelia, please," he pleaded, his voice thick with desperation. "Let me explain." Grandma opened the door a crack, her expression unreadable. Mark launched into a groveling apology, spewing words about realizing his mistakes and trying to distance himself from his parents. The anger that had been simmering inside me bubbled over. I barged into the hallway, a cold fury in my eyes. "Distance himself," I scoffed. "Mark, you were about to spend my money taking them on a vacation. This isn't about you suddenly seeing the light. This is about you being comfortable. Comfortable because I paid the bills and bought your parents presents." He opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. "No, Mark, this is over. I don't want to build a life with someone who prioritizes comfort over respect or someone who lets his parents walk all over him and his wife. I deserve better than that." Mark's face crumpled, but this time I felt no pity. The door shut with a finality that echoed in the silence that followed. Maybe Grandma was right. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning of something new, something better. A life free of entitled in-laws, a life filled with respect, and maybe someday, love that wasn't selfish or convenient.